Chapter 827. In fact, the best way to slap Jiang Hai's face right now was to directly ask, "Is this a lot of money? We'll give you the money." But unfortunately, these two couldn't say it out loud. $1 is equivalent to 1,200 Korean won. 30 million, that's 36 billion Korean won. What does 36 billion mean? Li Xingji has been popular for several years. His total net worth is 5 to 6 billion Korean won, and this is his own. In other words, the money he earns is shared with him and his company. Under such circumstances, he only has this much money. Girls' Generation was indeed very popular a few years ago. Although Jiang Hai didn't know, they were still very popular in Asia. After changing the contract, they earned a lot. But before that, they divided it among 9 people. Before that, it was reported that they could earn 30 billion Korean won a year. But the contract with South Korea's management company, even if it was divided according to 30%, 10 billion Korean won for 9 people. That's more than 1 billion Korean won per person, and they still have to pay taxes. From 2009 until the large-scale exposure of relationships in 2014, they were considered a top girl group. They had made a fortune for 6 years. So after so many years, they could be considered as their own real estate. It was already not bad for each of them to have a net worth of nearly 10 billion Korean won. Now that Jiang Hai was talking about 36 billion Korean won, they really couldn't take out that much money. And even if they can afford it, they may not be willing to do so. They worked so hard to earn so much money. Do they want to go back to square one? They looked at each other. Their eyes were full of helplessness. Is there no room for negotiation? We don't have that much money. Looking at Jiang Hai, Kim Taeyin finally gritted her teeth and said helplessly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled, and Cheryl Lee also smiled. You say that you don't have the money, and you're not going to do anything. What makes you think you can make Jiang Hai give in? It's really funny. Looking at the 2 people in front of her, Cheryl Lee said with a funny face. Hearing Cheryl Lee's words and recalling Li Shihuai outside the door, the 2 were really speechless. They must make a decision. If this matter was not settled, then what Li Shihuai said outside might become true. Their careers and the safety of their families were placed in front of them. This really made them feel that they had no choice. The conversation between them was in Korean, so Jiang Hai couldn't understand it at all. He just stood there and watched them talk. If Jiang Hai knew what they were talking about, he would probably laugh. He wasn't the kind of person who would give face and earn 30 million less just because of 2 artists. After all, he wasn't their fan. If something really happened between them, to be honest, it would be troublesome. This was because Jiang Hai didn't want to give up the money, and he didn't want to eat it all. Even if he didn't want to, he would still feel distressed. However, Cheryl Lee didn't know what Jiang Hai was thinking, and Azalina wouldn't say it. If Chi Jia and the others were here, they would definitely understand Jiang Hai's thoughts, but Cheryl Lee couldn't. Her acquaintance with Jiang Hai was actually a misunderstanding. After all, she wasn't Jiang Hai's woman, but Pra Walton's. Oni. Hearing Cheryl Lee's aggressive words, Lin Yun, couldn't help but panic. She looked at Jean Taeyen and said nervously. She wasn't alone now, she still had her boyfriend. It was really a coincidence. Her boyfriend was Li Xingji, who offended Jiang Hai at the airport today. But now she didn't know about this. She only knew that she wanted to keep her job, protect her family, and not betray her boyfriend. So now she was a little panicked. She couldn't help but hold Jean Taeyen's hand and whisper. Looking at her deer-like eyes that were about to cry, Jean Taeyen sighed helplessly. In fact, she also had a boyfriend before, although that boyfriend was more of a hype than a relationship. But after all, she had also invested a little in that relationship. However, they had separated a few days ago. Now, she was alone. If sacrificing herself could save her career, her family, and Lin Yun, then she, thinking of this, Jean Taeyen gritted her teeth and slowly took a step forward. She looked at Jiang Hai and Cheryl in front of her. I I can, please let Yun-er go. She has a better future, Anne. Looking at Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee in front of her, Jean Tien bit her lips and said. Now they couldn't avoid it, so she was ready to sacrifice herself. Oni, you can't. Seeing Jean Tien was ready to sacrifice herself, Lin Yun panicked and immediately pulled her back. This won't do. You two came in, and only one of you expressed sincerity. What does this mean? But it was a pity that the loving scene between the two sisters had touched Cheryl Lee's heart. She wouldn't let them off easily. She let out a cold snort and said to them calmly. Upon hearing Cheryl Lee's words, the two of them couldn't help but tremble. If you don't want to, the door is behind you. Jiang Hai won't force you to do anything. Seeing the two stunned girls, Cheryl Lee couldn't help saying with a chuckle. Hearing her words, the two girls knew that they had no way out. I hope you can keep your words. After thinking for a while, as if she had made up her mind, Lin Yun-er, who had been hesitating just now, bit her lips and took a step forward. Then she took off her coat and began to unbutton her shirt. Looking at her tearful gaze, Jean Tien seemed to have sensed her will. Gritting her teeth, Jean Tien also took a step forward and began to take off her coat. Looking at their movements, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. I didn't say I wanted them to do this. Looking at the firm gaze of the two, Jiang Hai immediately asked Cheryl Lee. I thought you liked them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee was also stunned. How about I tell them to stop? Looking at the two grief-stricken women over there, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but smile brightly. Then, she whispered to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai curled his lips helplessly. The two of them were about to be naked. If Jiang Hai were to say that he was just teasing them, wouldn't that be nonsense? Looking at Jiang Hai's gaze, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but smile awkwardly. It seemed that she was thinking too much. $30 million in profit. She also knew that this wasn't a small amount, but fortunately, Cheryl Lee's mind worked quickly. The only thing she could do now was to properly train them and let Jiang Hai feel that the $30 million were worth it. At this moment, the two on the other side had also finished their preparations. Then, two naked figures appeared in front of Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee. However, they were both blocking their private parts. Their faces were also red as they looked into the distance. It had to be admitted that perhaps because of their years of dancing, their figures were really good. The girls in Jiang Hai's manor also had good figures. Compared to them, these two weren't inferior at all. Next, here's the chance to show your sincerity. Do whatever I do. Looking at the two people in front of her, Cheryl Lee couldn't help but smile. Then, under Jiang Hai's puzzled gaze, she knelt down in front of him and took out the thing that Jiang Hai couldn't describe before swallowing it. Seeing this scene, the two people couldn't help but breathe heavily. They had never experienced such a thing before. This kind of thing. Oh my God. Next, it's your turn. After about 5 minutes, Cheryl Lee raised her head again and said to the two in front of her. Since they had already made up their minds, under Cheryl Lee's urging, the two slowly walked over and knelt in front of Jiang Hai. Jean Tien opened her mouth and finally put her mouth on it in shame. But as soon as she touched it, she turned her head and lay on the ground. Although Jiang Hai had just finished bathing, she couldn't bear the smell. Oni. Looking at Jean Tien's appearance, Lin Yun-er's tears finally couldn't help but flow down. But she still put her mouth on it and took the initiative to swallow it. The taste instantly made her want to vomit, but she endured it. Don't just stand there, use your tongue flexibly. You're really stupid. And you, don't just stand there and spit. Come here, these two things are yours. Looking at the two people in front of her, Cheryl Lee loudly said. Why don't we just forget about it? Upon hearing Cheryl Lee's words, the two of them shuddered and moved closer to her. Jiang Hai also saw the resistance in their eyes and couldn't help but say. All right, let's just forget about it. How can we forget about it? This is $30 million. Just enjoy it. Listen to me today. Tomorrow, I'll arrange some fun things for you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee also knew that she was wrong, so she said to Jiang Hai. Now, all she could do was to make Jiang Hai as happy as possible. We can't forget about it. It's already like this. If we forget about it, what are we? Remember what you promised us. Hearing the conversation between the two, Jean Taiyan also raised her head at this moment and looked at Jiang Hai. A trace of determination flashed in her eyes, and then she took the initiative to lean on him. For them, since they had made up their minds to take this step, there was no turning back. Looking at their eyes, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say now. Chapter 828. The autumn sunshine of South Korea shone through the thick curtains into Jiang Hai's bedroom. Feeling the sunshine, Jiang Hai also opened his eyes in a daze. Compared to the jet lag of most people, Jiang Hai was fine. When he opened his eyes, he also saw the women lying in his arms on both sides. These two women were the ones who made up their minds last night. Looking at the makeup on their faces that was ruined by tears, Jiang Hai also let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that he did not control the power from the primitive world last night. These two girls should have been tormented quite badly. After stretching his neck, Jiang Hai slowly pulled his arms out from under their necks, then took his clothes and left the room. After closing the door of the room, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head with a headache. To be honest, Jiang Hai was not interested in them at first. In fact, until now, he still couldn't remember their names. Originally, this matter was very simple. Jiang Hai didn't care who took the money from South Korea. He was determined to take the money. This was also the price they had to pay for detaining his plane. But now, after last night's incident, Jiang Hai really couldn't say anything. After all, he was not the kind of person who was so heartless that he would turn his face away after doing something. Therefore, he was definitely going to lose this money. Although he didn't care much about the 30 million, he still felt some heartache when talking about it. You're up. Watching Jiang Hai leave the room, Cheryl Lee, who had gotten up early, was sitting on the sofa in the living room at this time, watching a Korean drama. When she heard the sound of Jiang Hai opening the door, she also looked at Jiang Hai and said apologetically. She knew that because of her, Jiang Hai lost a lot yesterday. Although she had tried her best to make Jiang Hai happy last night, compared with real money, the bodies of the three women didn't seem to be worth it. Oh, what are you looking at? After rubbing his hair, Jiang Hai put on his clothes and sat next to Cheryl Lee. He was not in a hurry to wash up. He wanted to talk to her first. I didn't see anything. I'm sorry about last night. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee decided to apologize to Jiang Hai. It's okay, forget it. After all, I also got some benefits. If you really feel guilty, then take me out to play today. Looking at Cheryl Lee in front of him, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee was relieved. As long as Jiang Hai didn't blame her, that was the best. I've already made the arrangements. We'll go to the South Gate first, then to Jingfu Palace, and then to Qinghua Terrace. If there's still time, we'll go to Ming Cave. After dinner, we can go to Nanshan. It's very nice to take the cable car there at night. Then, I'll organize a party at Bao Ting. There are many beautiful women there, Cheryl Lee said immediately after hearing Jiang Hai's words. It could be seen that she really wanted to take Jiang Hai out to play. At this moment, the door to Azalina's room opened, and 3 people walked out. We're going out to play in a while. Are you coming too? Looking at the 3 people here, Jiang Hai asked them. Let Azalina protect you. We won't go. After all, you're not that popular here. When you go out to play, try to be careful. Don't go to places with too many people. Azalina looked at Jiang Hai and said calmly. This was not because they were looking for excuses or because they were angry. It was because this was their working state. Jiang Hai knew very well that he was not that popular in South Korea. The pressure on the shoulders of these 3 people was still very heavy. Okay, we'll do as you say. By the way, Tell them in a while that we'll contact the people of South Korea to negotiate today. Also, if the two women in the room have any requests, try to satisfy them if it's not too troublesome. Jiang Hai was a person who always paid attention to an equivalent exchange. Although the two women accompanied him yesterday because of the pressure from above, it was still not enough. But after all, something had happened between them, so Jiang Hai couldn't say much. However, it was not his character to completely ignore them. Although he didn't even know the names of the two women, it didn't prevent him from giving more instructions. We got it. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Azalina also said something. After that, Jiang Hai went to wash up. After washing up, he, Cheryl, and Azalina went to the hotel's breakfast restaurant to have breakfast, then borrowed a hotel car to leave the hotel and go out to play. As one of the most luxurious hotels in Seoul, the Shilla Hotel naturally had many luxury cars. But for Jiang Hai, those luxury cars were not necessary, so he just borrowed a modern jeans and left. The price of this car in China is more than 300,000 yuan. It's not very eye-catching on the streets of South Korea. Cheryl Lee drove the car, took Jiang Hai and the others out of the hotel, and went to the place she booked. Less than half an hour after they left, the two women in the room also woke up. When they opened their eyes, they saw each other and saw the sadness, despair, and shame in each other's eyes. The two of them still had some memories due to the strange state of their bodies and the fragments of what happened last night. However, to them, these memories were nothing but humiliation. The atmosphere in the room was extremely oppressive for a moment. More than 10 minutes passed unknowingly. Kim Tae-in sat up first and then began to put on her clothes. Lin Yuner saw this scene and also put on her clothes. The two quietly put on their clothes. After everything was done, they opened the door and walked out. As soon as they walked out, they saw Huali fiddling with the computer in the distance. Oh. You're awake. Seeing the two get up, Huali also smiled and said to them. Oh, hello, where are they? Seeing Huali ask them, the two immediately nodded. Although they were not used to it, she still wanted to ask. After all, they didn't accompany them for nothing last night. Oh, they have already gone out, but you can rest assured. Jiang Zhou told us that the people in the team are already in contact with the higher-ups of South Korea. Hearing her words, Huali on the other side also said. That's good. Hearing Huali's words, the two women breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Jiang Hai kept his word, their sacrifice was not in vain. Thinking of their family and career, losing some other things was also acceptable. Although it may become a permanent pain in their hearts. You have to be more open-minded. In fact, Jiang Hai is still a very good person. He also specifically told us that if you have any requests or troubles, you can tell him and he will help you solve it. Here, this is his phone number. If there is anything, you can contact him at any time. Looking at the two in front of her, Huali also handed over 2 business cards and said with a smile. After receiving the business cards, the two really didn't know what to do. This night, was it just for this thing? Thinking of this, the two couldn't help but smile bitterly, but they still put away the business cards, then nodded, put on their shoes, and left the hotel. When they got into the elevator, the two women were a little numb. Jean Taeyin was okay, she was just very sad, but Lin Yuner was still a little numb because she didn't know how to face her lover. She felt very dirty now, but in order to save her job and her family, she had to do this. Looking at her grief-stricken face, Jean Taeyin sighed. She didn't know how to persuade her at this time. Things had already happened. The only thing they could do was to forget this as soon as possible. After all, Jiang Hai wouldn't stay here for long. As long as this matter was over, everything would be over. But there were many coincidences in the world. He wasn't someone you could just pass by if you wanted to. After learning that he had offended Jiang Hai yesterday, Li Xingji used all his connections and finally found out that Jiang Hai was staying at the Shilla Hotel. So he came here early this morning to wait for Jiang Hai, hoping to please Jiang Hai so that Jiang Hai wouldn't hate him. Unfortunately, he didn't come at the right time. Jiang Hai just left in the morning. When he wanted to ask Jiang Hai's floor in the lobby, the elevator just reached the first floor. When the two women saw Li Xingji in front of them, the two women were stunned. Li Xingji was also stunned. Early in the morning, his girlfriend's hair was a little messy, and her clothes weren't very neat. Li Xingji wasn't a child. Suddenly, he felt that he seemed to be a little green. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know about this. Because after he ordered this matter, according to his thoughts, he shouldn't meet with the two women again. So he was still very happy in soul. Jiang Hai went to the scenic spots mentioned by Cheryl Li. But to be honest, these things were just a so-so. The so-called South Gate was just a gate. What national treasure? There was really nothing to see. Jianbokgung was more or less a building complex. He could take a look at it. Chongwudi wasn't allowed to enter, but it was the only place in Seoul where he could see the police. After looking around, Cheryl Li took Jiang Hai and the others to eat a South Korean barbecue at noon. After eating the barbecue, they continued to stroll in the afternoon. But there weren't many places to visit. Chapter 829. Myeongdong was a landmark in South Korea in the eyes of many fans of Korean dramas. Because there were many Korean dramas that would be filmed here, the business street that was originally not very popular unknowingly became very popular. In Myeongdong, all the shops required waiters who could speak Chinese. These people were prepared for the Chinese tourists. It can be said that over the year, more than 80% of the transactions in Myeongdong were from Chinese tourists. There were very few Southern Caucasians who would come here to buy things. Compared to the South Gate and East Gate, the sales here were much higher. But there was an important problem. Other than some super department stores, the so-called luxury goods sold here were actually more of South Korea's local brands. The most famous foreign brand was Zara. Zara was a Spanish brand. To be honest, the Spanish people did not earn as much as Wuxia people. In Europe, it was rare to find someone who could earn more than Wuxia. Of course, this was referring to the purchasing rate. There were not many young people who could earn more than 2,000 euros a month overseas. Of course, this was after tax. In China, there were not many young people who could earn more than 2,000 euros a month. After all, the starting salary in China was about 3,000 euros. So, the big brands in Spain were just a so-so. That was why not many South Koreans came to Myeongdong. Most of them were foreign tourists. Jiang Hai and the others strolled around the place and then left. Even if they were women, it was very difficult for them to have the impulse to buy things here. After all, Jiang Hai's family lived in the United States. What they bought there was cheaper than here, and the quality was better than here. What was there to buy there? After walking around Myeongdong, they went to Nanshan. Nanshan Park in South Korea was a landmark building. The most famous building was Nanshan Pagoda. This place was also popular because of Korean dramas and the like. But Jiang Hai came over to take a look. To be honest, there was nothing fun about this old park. The whole tower was only 200 meters high. Compared to the 500 or 600 meter towers in China, there was a big difference. And the whole Nanshan Hill, it was more accurate to say that it was a hill. Jiang Hai came from Ice City in the plains, but in his view, Nanshan Hill was a hill, not to mention his friends from the south. But there were some die-hard fans who liked this place very much. When Jiang Hai and the others went to play, there were people taking selfies everywhere. If you want to take a selfie, then take a good selfie. After all, this place was also a scenic spot. If you want to do something about it, then do something about it. Jiang Hai could only laugh at this. After walking around Nanshan Pagoda for a while, they went directly to the revolving Western restaurant on the 5th floor for dinner. Then, Jiang Hai and the rest drove directly to Biyao. The so-called Biyao did not refer to a hotel or a building. It referred to an area. The city of South Korea was divided into areas at the beginning. Below the area was a cave. They did not understand why it was divided into caves, but this was how it was divided. Biyao Cave, compared to Myeongdong, was also a trendy distribution center. But compared to Myeongdong, which was mostly tourists, there were more local tourists in South Korea here. This was basically a place where the so-called elites and petty bourgeoisie gathered. In addition to the famous brands, there were many cafes, restaurants with specialties from different countries, beauty shops, and so on. At the same time, there were many South Korean companies here. It was normal to meet some celebrities here. But to be honest, it was not a big deal to meet a celebrity in South Korea because there were really too many celebrities in South Korea. They relied on this to push up their economy. In addition to these things, of course, there were also some high-end nightclubs and high-end bars. This was because during the day, the main customers here were fashionable women in their 20s. Where there were women, there would naturally be men. Where there were men, there would be demand. So when it was night time, the nightclubs here were also quite chaotic. Jiang Hai said that he did not like to go to nightclubs because he did not like to be too noisy, but he was still somewhat interested in the place arranged by Cheryl Lee. After the car was parked, Jiang Hai and the rest walked into the nightclub that Cheryl Lee had arranged in advance. As soon as they walked in, Jiang Hai was shocked by the lively atmosphere. He had to admit that the people of South Korea really liked to go to nightclubs. Many of the dance songs were from South Korea. The musicians here also particularly liked to play electronic music and dance music. When Jiang Hai came, it was almost 10 o'clock in the evening. It was the time when people were having the most fun. Countless strangely dressed young men and women were doing their best to dance on the dance floor. Regardless of whether it was plastic surgery or not, Jiang Hai glanced around. The quality of the girls here was quite good. They had the face and the figure. When they danced, they might have been influenced by some girl groups, so their dance steps were quite cough cough forcibly withdrawing his gaze. Jiang Hai followed the waiter to the second floor. The private room booked by Cheryl was on the second floor. The private room on the second floor facing the stage was the one she booked. After they sat down, a waiter came over and asked them what they wanted. Although Jiang Hai did not like this kind of environment, he was still quite interested in drinking. So he ordered 2 bottles of wine, a lot of beer, a fruit plate, snacks, and so on. Generally, boys don't ask girls if they want to drink when they come here. From this, it can be seen that Mr. Jiang is a good person. At this time, Eun Soon also said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was even more at a loss. Am I labeled as a good person just like this? Let's drink beer. Come on, cheers. At this time, Cheryl also came over, opened a few bottles of beer and stuffed them into the hands of these girls, then said with a smile. Hearing Cheryl's words, the girls here also raised the beer bottles in their hands. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai also smiled softly. If they want to drink, then drink. Anyway, it's not like he can't afford it. After several bottles touched together, everyone also took a big sip. Jiang Hai also tasted South Korea's beer for the first time. How should he put it? The taste was not very good, but it was barely drinkable. The beer that Jiang Hai and the others drank was called Hite Hit. It was not cheap, but the taste was really ordinary. The alcohol content was a little high, and it was not strong. The bitter taste was very strong. No wonder in South Korea, soju was much better than beer. Chapter 830. What kind of business does Mr. Jiang do? After drinking a few mouthfuls of beer, these girls were more relaxed and began to wander around the room. Cheryl Lee also took them to play. At this time, Lee Xiaobin, who had been paying attention to Jiang Hai just now, came over and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at this woman. Even if Jiang Hai had seen so many delicate flowers, this woman could be rated above 90 points in Jiang Hai's eyes. Whether it was because of makeup or plastic surgery, Jiang Hai didn't plan to spend a long time with her anyway, so objectively speaking, this woman was very good looking. She had an oval face, slender and big eyes, 2 reclining silkworms, a tall nose, a small mouth, long hair dyed half blonde, coupled with a slender neck and beautiful collarbones, and of course, the most important 2 brutal forces. She was indeed a weapon that could harvest otakus on the internet. Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at her. Oh, I raise cattle in the United States. Jiang Hai quietly picked up the beer and took a sip. He wasn't the kind of person who couldn't take his eyes off something. Before he went berserk, his self-control was still very strong. Raise cattle? Does this make money? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Xiaobin was stunned for a moment, then asked with some doubts. In fact, just like ordinary people, if ordinary people say that they raise cattle, people may not think that they have much money. This Li Xiaobin was the same. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, she couldn't help but have some doubts. Oh, it's okay. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Although he wouldn't hide his wealth, he wouldn't show off for no reason. This was not in line with his character. Moreover, even if he said that he raised cattle and fish and made billions of dollars a year, these people would have to believe it. Oh, I see. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Xiaobin smiled awkwardly and unconsciously moved back. To be honest, for women at their level, money was not the most important thing. For example, Yin Suan, who was next to him, had signed a contract with Wuxia's live streaming platform. It was said that just the signing fee alone was astronomical. In China, a first-class streamer could earn millions or even tens of millions of RMB a year. These people might not be the top streamers, but they definitely earned a lot. On average, each of the 3 people present had an annual income of nearly 10 million renminbi. According to the current exchange rate, 10 million renminbi was equivalent to 1.6 billion won. In South Korea, the top celebrities only earned this much in a year, and they still had to pay the management company. However, they only needed to pay some to their own team. Although this industry was purely based on youth, it could also be said that they were not short of money. The reason why they came here this time was mainly because of their relationship with Cheryl. But I didn't expect you to doubt me. Looking at the 3 women in front of her, Cheryl Lee chuckled and proudly raised her head. Seeing Cheryl Lee's appearance, the 3 women couldn't help but laugh. They didn't care about losing face in front of Cheryl. As long as they could get what they wanted, everything else didn't matter. After discussing in the bathroom, the 4 women left together. After returning to the private room, the 3 women were clearly more interested in Jiang Hai. Even Cheryl Lee was pushed to the side. Looking at the scene in front of her, Cheryl Lee didn't care. She was the one who invited the 3 women to accompany Jiang Hai. The more they drank, the more they drank. It was said that it was easy to do that after getting drunk. When a man wanted to do something with a woman, he would force her to drink. When a woman wanted to do something with a man, she would force them to drink. When a woman wanted to do something with a man, she would also force them to drink. Obviously, these women wanted to force Jiang Hai to drink. But unfortunately, even if it was a test of alcohol, it was impossible for them to force Jiang Hai to drink. When the alcohol that Jiang Hai ordered was almost finished, Jiang Hai's consciousness was still very clear. However, the 3 women seemed to have drunk too much. Of course, whether they were really drunk or not, Jiang Hai didn't know. But at this time, they were making noise about how hot it was. From time to time, they tore their clothes, revealing some things that couldn't be described. They also took the initiative to entangle Jiang Hai and whisper to him. Although Jiang Hai couldn't understand 9 out of 10 sentences, it didn't prevent him from understanding what these women meant. After being teased for so long, Jiang Hai felt that he was gradually losing his senses. It seemed that he would have to sleep late tonight. At this time, in the hall on the 1st floor, the atmosphere had reached its peak. After the live DJ played a few fireworks, several women ran out from the backstage. As soon as they saw these women, the people below became even crazier. Wow, this bar is very awesome. Today, they invited Hello Venus. Looking at the stage below, Yin Suan said with a smile, but hearing her words, Jiang Hai had some doubts because he didn't know what this was. Hello Venus is the name of a group. They debuted in 2012 and have never been very popular. At first, they were suppressed by Xiaoshi and TRR. Now, it is the era of AOA. They have never been popular, so they disbanded in 2014, but I heard that they are looking for opportunities to return to the stage recently. Looking at Jiang Hai's puzzled eyes, Sun Yunju also explained to Jiang Hai. Oh, that's it. Although he said this, to be honest, Jiang Hai really didn't know what the hell it was. At this time, the girls on the dance floor below had finished their opening remarks. The music sounded, and they were ready to dance. Wow, it's Wiggle, I can dance this. Hearing the music, Li Xiaobin couldn't help but jump up with a smile. She said to Jiang Hai with a happy face, then came to the middle of the private room. Tisk, as if no one can dance. Come, let's dance together. After hearing her words, Yin Suan and Sun Yunju also came over. After the three women looked at each other, they laughed. As the music sounded, the three of them bent down at the same time and delivered the indescribable thing that was perfectly wrapped in a one-step skirt to Jiang Hai. Ugh! Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai was a little confused. What's going on? Fortunately, he quickly understood that these were dance moves. However, he had to admit that the dance steps of the Southern Gaoli were indeed terrifying. Every step was like the claws and teeth of a devil. If young people were to see this, they would definitely suffer from malnutrition. It seems that the compulsory military service of South Korea should be related to these women's groups. When they can't stand it anymore, they have to go to the army to recuperate for 2 years. Otherwise, no matter how many eggs you have, you will not be able to stand it. Chapter 831. Hiss, I can't stand it anymore. Let's go back. Before the dance in front of him was finished, Jiang Hai already couldn't stand it anymore, so his eyes lit up and he said to Cheryl Lee next to him. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Cheryl Lee also rolled her eyes at Jiang Hai, then clapped her hands and gestured to the three girls. Then the three girls came over with a smile and began to pack their things. Jiang Hai naturally took advantage of them while they were packing their things. But instead of saying that Jiang Hai took advantage of them, it was better to say that they deliberately let Jiang Hai take advantage of them. After fooling around for about 10 minutes, they finished packing, but Jiang Hai's car certainly couldn't accommodate these 6 people. Although Jiang Hai didn't mind one of them sitting on him, the police would mind. So Jiang Hai thought for a while. He and Cheryl Lee took a taxi back. After all, he needed someone who could speak Korean to follow him. Azalina took them back to Jiang Hai's room in the Shilla Hotel first. Because if they wanted to take a taxi, it would be troublesome to meet them on the street now. Therefore, Cheryl Lee specially called for a taxi so that they could wait downstairs. As for Azalina and the others, they left first. After about 5 minutes, Cheryl's phone rang. The taxi had arrived. Then the two walked downstairs and prepared to go out and take a taxi back. But just when Jiang Hai was about to walk to the exit, he suddenly found a woman at a bar table in the distance. She seemed to have drunk too much and was lying on the table. Beside her, there were many men who always inadvertently walked past her table. This South Korea is really messy. Looking at the scene in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. He wasn't going to meddle in other people's business. At this moment, a person who looked like a gangster finally couldn't help it. He walked in front of the woman and prepared to take her away. This woman may still have some consciousness, so she resisted. This resistance caused the hair on her face to move to the side, revealing her face. When he saw her face, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, because he was very familiar with this face. To be exact, just 5 minutes ago, this face was still in front of his eyes. Sun Yunju? Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai couldn't help but gawk. Didn't she just leave with Azalina? Did Azalina suddenly throw a tantrum, so she left her here? And the clothes she is wearing are not the same. What the hell is this? Just as Jiang Hai was puzzled, Cheryl Lee over there also saw this person. Ah, it's Sun Yunju. Jiang Hai, hurry up. You can't take her away. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was no longer puzzled. Cheryl Lee and Sun Yunju were also friends. She shouldn't be mistaken. So Jiang Hai took 2 steps forward and went directly to the person who was about to take her away again. Boy, what are you doing? This sentence was in English. Looking at Azalina's gaze, Jiang Hai, who originally had some doubts about whether this woman was Sun Yunju, was relieved because he misunderstood the meaning of Azalina's gaze. Azalina was just a little surprised, but he thought that Azalina's gaze was, how can you still find her? Now that she saw Jiang Hai carrying her back, she didn't care. God knows what this woman did to her just now. She's in the room. Be gentle. You still have work tomorrow. Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina said to him. Work? Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was a little confused. Work? Well, didn't you say that you wanted the team to contact the South Korea government today? We've already contacted them today. The beef will be flown to Wuxia tonight, and the compensation is only $10 million. The South Korea government agreed very quickly, but they have another request. They will tell you tomorrow. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai nodded a little woodenly. It seemed that he couldn't stay out too late today. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai and Cheryl Lee walked into Jiang Hai's room together with Sun Yunju. Clang clang. However, just as they walked in, Jiang Hai saw three figures suddenly jump out from a distance. Of course, their jump did not scare Jiang Hai, and Jiang Hai was looking at the clothes of the three people in front of him unscrupulously. After the three of them came back, they deliberately took a shower first and then changed into very light pajamas. Rather than pajamas, it was more like a pair of, a hem. It was fine as long as everyone understood it. Their attire was visible at a glance, and there was a hint of sexiness to it. It made Jiang Hai's fingers itch instantly. Just as he was about to pounce on them, he realized that something was wrong. Sun Yunju, who he saw just now, was standing in front of him. If Sun Yunju was here, then what about the one in his arms? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at the one in his arms, and the others also looked at this person. This is... They originally thought that with the three of them tonight, Jiang Hai was already a little too much, but they didn't expect Jiang Hai to bring another one back. What the hell is this? Just now, this sister drank too much in the bar and was about to be bullied by some hooligans. I thought it was Yunju. It seems that I misunderstood. Looking at Sun Yunju in front of her, Cheryl Lee smiled a little awkwardly. What should we do now? Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai asked in a daze. This is awkward, call the police. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Yin Soen thought for a moment and said to Jiang Hai first. No, we didn't call the police just now. If we call the police now, we won't be able to explain it clearly. And if it is exposed. But as soon as she mentioned this matter, Li Xiaobin and Sun Yunju next to her immediately rejected it. They are also considered public figures with a reputation. Chapter 832. This body is so dirty. Back to the morning when Jiang Hai and the others went out to play. When Lin Yuner and Jean Taiyan, who had experienced something last night, went downstairs, they happened to meet Lin Yuner's boyfriend, Li Xingji. When he saw his girlfriend coming down from the elevator in the morning with her clothes in a mess and no makeup, he was stunned. When Lin Yuner saw him, she was even more stunned. The most embarrassing thing in the world might be something like this. It was too cruel, too NTR. But unfortunately, it was not Jiang Hai who was being tortured. Even if Jiang Hai knew, he would at most say that it was too embarrassing. He was originally a good person. Fortunately, Jean Taiyan reacted quickly. She immediately pulled Lin Yuner and got into the car they drove yesterday and quickly left. After Lin Yuner left, Li Xingji seemed to have gone crazy and kept calling her. He drove out to look for traces of them, but unfortunately, there was nothing. Lin Yuner could not face this man at this time. She also guessed that he might go to her home to look for her, so she did not go home. Instead, she went to Jean Taiyan's house. When she got home, the first thing she did was to take a shower. But after rubbing many times, she still felt very dirty. Not physically, but spiritually. She wiped the steamy mirror and looked at her body in the mirror that was already red from rubbing. Big drops of tears flowed down her red and swollen doe eyes. Probably because she heard the sound of the bathroom, Jean Taiyan also walked over and leaned against the door. She did not know what to do now. Last night, Yuner was not the only one who had a nightmare. She also had a nightmare. But now, she had to comfort this injured girl. But what should she say? What should she do? She also needed someone to comfort her. What should she do? Han Jiaran was born in Seoul, South Korea in 1982. She was considered a top student and graduated from Tsinghua University. In 2002, she entered the entertainment industry through a commercial. Then, she starred in Yellow Handkerchief. Once the TV series was broadcast, it could be said that she became popular. In the idol circle of South Korea, the most popular were not the more famous ones in Wuxia, such as Song Huiqiao and Kwon Ji-shin. The most popular was naturally the number one beauty of South Korea, Kim Tae-hee, while Han Jiaran and Sun Yijin coexisted behind her. It could be said that they were all part of the top group of female celebrities in South Korea. As for Han Jiaran, she could be said to be one of the representatives at the peak of her career. In 2005, she married another actor, Yen Jingshuan. He retired in 2007, probably due to financial reasons. He came back in 10 years, and after that, he became popular again. However, not long after she became popular, she retired again because of her pregnancy. It was the same this time. It had been a long time since she appeared in the public eye because she gave birth to her baby this year. Originally, this was a very enviable family in the entertainment industry, but things were never as perfect as outsiders imagined. The woman was pregnant for more than 9 months. When the man went out to work, he could always come into contact with those young and beautiful girls who wanted to climb up the social ladder. Naturally, her husband slowly went astray. She just found out about this today. After a big fight with her husband, who had just returned from a business meeting, she went to the bar to drink alone. However, she didn't expect that she would drink too much. She couldn't remember what happened next. She only vaguely remembered that she was taken away by a woman. Then, she vaguely remembered that she seemed to have entered a room where several women took off her clothes. Afterwards, she had a dream. It was a dream about something, a dream that couldn't be described. It wasn't until she woke up the next day and found herself lying naked in a room that she finally realized what had happened to her the night before. Ah! She held on to her hair and screamed loudly. She couldn't believe that she had spent the night outside like this. And, a few hours ago, she was still yelling at her husband for being unfaithful. But now, what right did she have to scold him? The relationship between men and women was unequal to begin with. This was even more so in South Korea. If a man got into an accident, a woman was likely to forgive him. But if a woman got into an accident, not only would the man not forgive her, but the whole world would criticize her. Thinking of this, Koreana couldn't help but feel a lump in her throat. Tears began to fall from her eyes. Ah! What happened? At this time, the door of the room opened, and Jiang Hai walked in with a puzzled look on his face. But when he saw Han Jiaran sitting there crying, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then he smiled a little awkwardly. Oh, you're awake. Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. He could only respond with a smile. You beast, you're worse than a pig or a dog. Looking at Jiang Hai, Koreana seemed to have found a breakthrough. She began to yell at him loudly. But unfortunately, it was like casting pearls before swine. Jiang Hai didn't understand at all. I'm sorry, I don't speak Korean, so I don't understand what you're saying. I still have things to do now. If you think of a solution, you can wait for me. You can use this room as you wish. Until she was tired of scolding, Jiang Hai scratched his head and said something that almost made her faint. Then he smiled apologetically and left. Looking at Jiang Hai's back as he left, Koreana threw the pillow next to her with all her strength. It hit the door heavily, and then she began to scream. But after screaming for a long time, she gradually calmed down. Since things had already happened, it was meaningless to think about it now. Now, she had to think about how to solve this matter. From this, it can be seen that Han Jia's ability to take a blow was much stronger than Lin Yun. Lin Yun was trying to save her career and her family. In the end, she ended up having sex with Jiang Hai. It could be said that one was willing to fight while the other was willing to obstruct. In the end, they both collapsed. But this woman quickly calmed down and began to think of a way. Her mind turned. The first thing she thought of was that this matter couldn't be publicized. She couldn't let others know. She couldn't call the police. Judging from what Jiang Hai said just now, although he had an Asian face, he should be a foreigner. If this matter was exposed, then she would be ruined. And this guy just patted his butt and went abroad. She still couldn't do anything. Secondly, she had to hide this matter from her husband. She was now in no mood to pursue her husband's affairs outside. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but feel sad. She was really a coward. She was raped, but the result was that she couldn't publicize it. She even had to reconcile with the person who raped her and ask him to help her hide this matter. Shame, although she felt humiliated from the inside out, she still stood up and put on her clothes. She wanted to find the man just now and explain things to him. However, when she opened the door, she only found 2 women in the living room. These 2 women, one a foreigner and one an Asian, were sitting there watching TV. When they heard the door open, the 2 of them also looked over. After seeing that it was Koreana, they smiled kindly. This. Looking at the situation outside, Koreana couldn't help but feel a little confused. She didn't know what to say. Hello, what's the matter? Are you not feeling well? Looking at her, Cheryl Lee stood up and asked with some doubts. The police station was open until very late last night, but early this morning, Yin Suan, Li Shubin, and Sun Yunju all left. After she got up, she also watched TV here. Last night, it was said that Jiang Hai would have a meeting with the senior management of South Korea today. So just now, Azalina and Galina left with Jiang Hai, leaving only Wallace Shelley here. The 2 of them were watching TV together. At this time, Koreana appeared, which also startled them. No, nothing, cough, there's something, where is that man? Although it was a bit difficult to say this, Koreana gritted her teeth. For her family, for her career, for her everything, she must reach an agreement with that man. Man? Oh, Jiang Hai? He went to a meeting. Are you looking for him for something? Looking at Koreana in front of her, Cheryl Lee asked with some doubts. Looking at her gnashing her teeth, it was better to pretend that she didn't know anything now. Chapter 833. Sitting in an extended Rolls-Royce, a person sent by Zhang Jin sat in front of Jiang Hai and said with a serious face, "Boss, this time, the South Korea side wants to see you. Their intention is very clear. They want to get the formula for the mutation of the forage from your hands, or they want to cooperate with you." This person was the person in charge of the negotiation team. Gao Peng had to admit that Zhang Jin was a talent. She had a good eye for people. The person in charge of the negotiation team in front of him was called Toulouse Parkville. He was a European of Greek descent. However, he had lived in the United States since he was young. He was already 35 years old this year. 10 years ago, he graduated from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. In the beginning, he was high-spirited. He went to New York to make a living as a trader, a salesman, and a worker. He had his glory and his downfall. After Jiang Hai established the Tinglong Company last year, Zhang Jin felt that he was a good person after some introductions. Thus, she accepted him into the company. It turned out that Toulouse Parkville was not suitable for starting his own business. However, it was not bad for him to work for someone else. He started as a salesman and became a sales supervisor within 3 months. Half a year later, he was promoted to the position of deputy manager of the sales department. Moreover, his ability had already surpassed that of a manager. His negotiation skills and ability to read people's minds were quite good. Most importantly, his 10 years of experience in society had smoothed out his edges and corners. He was now very willing to stay in the Tinglong Company. Of course, the salary that Jiang Hai gave him was also the basis for his agreement. Jiang Hai's company was not listed, so his shares were 100%. However, he gave out a 10% dividend to those who performed well. In addition to her annual salary of $1 million, Jing Jin also received a 5% dividend. Although this was the first year, there was not much profit. After all, the Tinglong company transported most of Jiang Hai's beef. However, the annual net profit was more than $50 million. She received a 5% dividend, which was $2.5 million. Together with her salary, it was $3.5 million. Such an annual salary was very scary for a new company. After all, the annual salary that the Walmart Group gave Pra Walton was only $3 million. Of course, this was also because she was only in charge of one department. Toulouse Parkville's annual salary was $300,000. However, Jing Jin gave him a 1% dividend, which meant that he could earn $800,000 this year. This was for a person who was unemployed a year ago. This was an astronomical figure. He knew very well that he was now tied to Jiang Hai's chariot. As long as he does his job well, his income will increase in the future. Otherwise, Jing Jin wouldn't have sent him as the head of the negotiation team. And this time, he didn't come here in vain. Jiang Hai had already made an agreement with him before he came. They could get 10% of the negotiated amount, which was the compensation amount. Therefore, they were all holding back at the beginning. They wanted the $100 million compensation. That 10% was $10 million. Divided among the 6 of them, and even if Moses Adams' share was included, each of them would get more than $1 million. However, Jiang Hai was in the lead and fell in love with his woman. Therefore, the $100 million became $10 million. However, $10 million was not bad. Each of them would get more than $1 million. As for why the South Koreans invited Jiang Hai to Kingwadi, he could more or less guess it. I feel the same way. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai chuckled. As soon as the South Koreans raised their butts, Jiang Hai knew that they were going to shit a few sheep dung eggs. These people were famous for their shamelessness. Boss, these are the plans we made for you. You can take a look. Hearing that Jiang Hai was mentally prepared, Tuluman smiled and took out a stack of papers from his briefcase. He handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took it and looked at it briefly. To be honest, Jiang Hai hated looking at things. However, now that it was related to business, he had to look at it even if he did not want to. After glancing at the things on the paper, Jiang Hai really thought highly of Tuluman. On this stack of papers, almost all the things that the South Koreans might ask Jiang Hai about were listed. If Jiang Hai was interested, he could take note of it. According to the things written on it, it was enough to deal with the South Koreans without leaving any loopholes. However, Jiang Hai smiled and returned the stack of papers to Tuluman in front of him. Boss? Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Tuluman was a little confused. Was Jiang Hai not satisfied with these things? No, I'm quite satisfied with these things, but you've got one thing wrong. That's the problem between me and the South Koreans. Our pasture is unique in the world, and it's absolutely impossible for others to copy it. Therefore, the things you wrote about dealing with a country are more about me at the bottom, while the South Koreans are at the top. Looking at Tuluman in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. To be honest, if he was just an ordinary person, then this document would be excellent. If his pasture could be deciphered, then this document would also be good. Because this document perfectly demonstrated the word subterfuge. It's not that I don't want to give it to you, it's not that I don't want to announce it, but it's not the time yet. This word, subterfuge, is a very correct approach for other people. After all, Jiang Hai is a person, and the South Koreans are a country. But it doesn't exist for Jiang Hai because his main business projects are in the United States. Wuxia is also connected. The South Koreans can't threaten him at all. He's probably going to leave this time, and it's unlikely that he'll come back in the future. The secret of the pasture will never be deciphered by anyone. He's more confident about this than anyone else. After all, there's only one Dragon Ball in the world, and it's now in his body. What's there to study? Therefore, the person who led this conversation between him and the South Koreans was Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai is standing in a high position, and he's looking at a country with a gaze of charity. Yes, the current Jiang Hai has such strength and ability. According to the Prawalton calculation, if Jiang Hai's manor were to be listed now, the cattle, the fishery, and the pasture, Jiang Hai's current wealth would be worth at least tens of billions. It wouldn't be a problem for him to become the richest man in the world. Of course, Jiang Hai is only rich. When it comes to influence, he's far behind. Yes, I understand. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Tuluman also nodded. Although he doesn't know where Jiang Hai's confidence comes from, believing that his pasture is absolutely impossible to decipher, Jiang Hai's confidence can save him a lot of trouble. Of course, he will still do what needs to be done. 10 years of working life made him understand. Sometimes, for some work, it's not a matter of whether you do it or not, but whether you do it or not. For example, this stack of reports. Even if he knew Jiang Hai's confidence, he would still do it. This is some of the rules of the workplace. Just like now, although Jiang Hai didn't use his report, he still praised him, didn't he? We've arrived at the Blue House. At this moment, Galena, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, suddenly said to the back of the car. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at the existence of the highest honor in South Korea. Let's go. Under the bright sun, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes and said softly. Tuluman, who was sitting opposite him, got out of the car first and opened the door for Jiang Hai. Then, Azalina and Galena rushed over and stood next to Jiang Hai. At this time, the two had changed into casual women's suits. Their hair was tied up and they wore sunglasses. They really looked stern. In addition to the two of them, one of the two male bodyguards also came to act as a driver. After standing in place, Jiang Hai's group of 5 also walked into the Blue House. The guard had already reported the news of Jiang Hai's arrival, so when Jiang Hai walked to the door, there were already people there to greet him. Of course, with Jiang Hai's current status, the president of South Korea would not come to greet him. The people who came to greet him were the people in charge of this matter. Jiang Hai also knew 2 of them. Chapter 834. Mr. Jiang Hai, I have been waiting for you for a long time. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai greeted him with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, stepped forward and shook hands with him, then looked at the representative over there. I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. Looking at Jiang Hai, the arrogant representative also said softly. Yeah, but didn't you say that you have nothing to do with this matter? Now it doesn't look like you have nothing to do with it. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the person here couldn't help but chuckle. Those people seem to think that this technology of yours is extremely important, and you are very hostile, so they sent me, someone who has been in contact with you, to explore your background. Looking at Jiang Hai, this person didn't care what Jiang Hai thought and said directly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and he couldn't deny such an attitude. Please. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care about what he said, the person also nodded with a smile, then made a gesture of invitation. He motioned to Jiang Hai to go in, but just as Jiang Hai was about to walk in, his personal phone rang. Picking it up and looking at it, he found that it was an unfamiliar phone. Jiang Hai thought for a moment, then gestured to everyone, asking them to wait a moment, and then went to the side to pick it up. Hello? Hello, who is this? After connecting the phone, Jiang Hai asked the person on the other side. Hello, my name is. Cough, I don't know if you still remember what happened last night. I am the woman this morning. After hearing Jiang Hai's voice, the woman on the other side subconsciously wanted to say her name, but she quickly covered it up, and then said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also remembered the scene this morning. Oh, of course I remember. What's the matter? Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. I think we should meet. I have something to say to you. After thinking for a while, the woman said to Jiang Hai over the phone. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his nose. All right. I'm at the Blue House now. If you need me, you can come over first. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to tell her his location. After all, something happened last night. Jiang Hai also wanted to know why she was looking for him. I want to talk to you in private. I won't take up too much of your time. As soon as she heard the 3 words Blue House, the woman on the other side was obviously stunned for a moment. Then she gently bit her lips and said to Jiang Hai, "Oh, I don't know about this. Let's wait until you come over. I don't know when it will end here." Glancing at Li Shihuai and the man beside him, Jiang Hai thought for a while and said to her, "Then, okay, when I arrive, I will call you." Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the woman also said a sentence and then hung up the phone. In fact, when she heard that Jiang Hai was at the Blue House, to be honest, she was a little panicked. Blue House, the highest place in South Korea. For the people of South Korea, Blue House was the same as a certain sea in Wuxia. The people who could go there were undoubtedly people that she, as a star, couldn't afford to provoke. But for her career and her family, she must go and explain it to Jiang Hai. She took a deep breath, gave herself a pep talk, and directly called the taxi driver to drive to Blue House. At this time, after Jiang Hai saw her hang up the phone, he shrugged and followed the person who greeted him into the Blue House. Of course, after they entered, they couldn't walk around casually. After all, the president and the others were still working here. So they just entered a small conference room and sat down. The people here also exchanged a few pleasantries before getting to the main topic. After Li Shihuai spoke, Jiang Hai and Tuluman couldn't help but look at each other with a trace of disdain on their lips. Sure enough, the first thing South Korea wanted to do when they called Jiang Hai over was to buy out Jiang Hai's secret recipe for the growth of forage grass. For this, they were willing to pay $50 billion, which was 60 trillion won. South Korea's national GDP was $1,378 billion a year. They could give half of the country's total monthly income to Jiang Hai, which was already a large sum of money. But to be honest, 50 billion was not enough for Jiang Hai. You don't have to say that. I don't know why my forage grass is so good, let alone buying it out. If you mention this again, then I think our cooperation will end. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai gently threw the pen in his hand on the table, then leaned back in his chair and spoke with a trace of disdain on his face. If Mr. Jiang doesn't want to share the secret of forage grass, then can you transfer your manor in Winthrop? We are also very interested in it. For this, we are willing to pay $20 billion. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Shihuai hesitated for a moment before speaking to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at him like he was an idiot. Indeed, his manor itself was not very valuable, but the grass in the manor was very valuable. Moreover, the most important thing was that no one dared to touch him now because he could still create benefits for several parties. If his manor was gone, although he could build another one, Jiang Hai estimated that no one would give him a few more years to grow. Although $20 billion was good, if Jiang Hai wanted it, he would be like a child walking on the road with gold bricks in his arms. He had to have the ability to protect this sum of money, but now it seemed that he obviously did not have such ability. Let's go. It seems that the sincerity of the South Korea side is really not that good. I really regret letting you come into contact with them. After saying that, Jiang Hai directly stood up and prepared to leave. Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to leave, the South Korea people also stood up, but their expressions were a little contradictory. Some of them had a flattering smile on their faces, while others had a touch of coldness. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile in disdain. Would these guys dare to make a move on him in the Blue House? He just laughed it off. Mr. Jiang, don't we have to talk about everything? Don't you think so? Li Shihuai also walked out at this time and stopped Jiang Hai with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked around and then slowly walked back. However, he did not take his bag and sit down. Instead, he stood there and touched the seat with his hand, slowly tapping it. If I hear one more time that you want me to sell secrets or manners, then I'll leave. From now on, the supply of pasture to the South Korea will also be suspended. You guys should be careful. Only Jiang Hai dared to speak so arrogantly to a country. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the South Korea people felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. It was understandable. The people of South Korea were known for their strong self-esteem. In their eyes, the whole world had to acknowledge them. What they said was right. However, now that Jiang Hai actually slapped them in the face in front of them, they could not take it anymore. But fortunately, they knew that Jiang Hai was not a person to be trifled with, so they forcibly suppressed the anger in their hearts and returned to the table with a smile. Since the secret and the manor were not for sale, then it seemed that the only thing they could buy was the pasture and cooperation. According to them, they were going to raise a batch of their so-called national treasures after Jiang Hai provided them with pasture. Listening to them bragging about how awesome their Korean cows were, Jiang Hai could not help but chuckle, but he did not say anything. He just quietly watched these people bragging. Did they really think that he was Xiao Bai, who had never raised cows before? What a joke. Jiang Hai had been raising cows for 3 years. Not to mention other more detailed work, at least he could tell the quality of the cattle. At present, the best cattle in the world was naturally the Japanese cattle. Although he hated Japan, he had to admit this. Next would be the Charolais cattle, followed by the Limousin cattle. If the milk production was taken into account, then it would be the Simmental cattle. After that, it would be the German cattle, followed by the Angus cattle, and then the Mola buffalo. Purely based on the breed of cattle, the domestic Lucy yellow cattle were ranked higher than the South Korean cattle. However, the South Korea people were infatuated with their Han cattle. They boasted every day that Han cattle was a breed that could compete with Chinese cattle. Sitting next to Azalina, Jiang Hai looked at Han Jia in front of him and said, Are you done with your business? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jia's words were a little difficult for a while, so she could only exchange a few words. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai sighed, then shook his head. Although you're from southern Gaoli, I still have to say that your government is really a bunch of bastards. You don't know what kind of conditions they gave me in order to get me to help you build a cattle farm. With a chuckle, Jiang Hai looked at Han Jia's in front of him and said somewhat speechlessly. Back to 10 minutes ago, in the conference room of Chongwadi where Jiang Hai was, those senior officials of South Korea first asked to buy out Jiang Hai's pasture. After that failed, they wanted to buy a manor. Naturally, this also didn't work. In the case that the first two conditions didn't work, they wanted to buy more pasture. The original 900,000 tons was naturally not enough. Therefore, when they asked to increase it to 3 million tons, Jiang Hai naturally refused. Although it was 3 million or 1 million, Jiang Hai had to consider where he would get the 100,000 tons from. Although he still had some in stock, why would he sell it to South Korea? The people of South Korea mainly had these three thoughts. If the first one didn't work, the second one didn't work, and the third one didn't work, then this meeting with Jiang Hai would be meaningless, especially since Li Shihuai had been discussing with Jiang Hai how much they could increase it. But Jiang Hai was adamant that they couldn't increase it at all, unless they could take it from him. But they weren't stupid. They knew that this was simply impossible. They couldn't afford to provoke Du Feynman. He was the royal family of Dubai. The Arabs in the Middle East all wore the same pants. If they dared to go against those people, these people could join forces to mess with the United States. If the United States was messed with, they would definitely vent their anger on South Korea. After all, South Korea didn't produce oil. Luke Shawn was an international tycoon and one of the largest ranchers in the central part of the United States. They didn't dare to be arrogant. John Malone was even more so. These few big heads couldn't move, and the same was true for those small heads. That was why they were a little conflicted. Seeing that Jiang Hai was still unmoved, Li Shihuai also knew that there wouldn't be any effect if he continued to talk like this. So, he thought of Jiang Hai's weakness and the habits of Wuxia people. Wuxia people were used to talking about business at the table, so he smiled and temporarily gave up on asking Jiang Hai to make a statement this morning. Instead, he made a dinner appointment in the evening to talk about it then. At this time, Jiang Hai was also a little interested in them. He wanted to see what these guys wanted to do. After making an appointment, Jiang Hai came to the coffee shop as Azalina said. "Oh, since you are so busy, then I will make a long story short. I hope that no one else will know about what happened last night." Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiaran hesitated for a moment and said to Jiang Hai in a tough tone. "Oh. Why do you say that?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai leaned back and looked at her with some doubts. I have my own career, my own family, and I have a lovely daughter, so I don't want these to be destroyed. What happened last night was a heavy blow to my family, so I hope we can skip this part." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran bit her lip and said to Jiang Hai. "Oh." Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai shook his head. In fact, in essence, Jiang Hai is not a bad person. Of course, he is definitely not a good person. He is just an ordinary person. If Han Jiaran didn't come to him today and just left, maybe Jiang Hai would have forgotten about it, but this woman came to him specifically, which made Jiang Hai's soul of seeking death begin to stir. Touching his chin, he didn't agree as Han Jiaran imagined. I can give you money, please forget what happened last night." Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Han Jiaran hesitated for a moment, bit her lip, and said with a serious face. To be honest, although her family's finances are good, they are not particularly rich. They don't have to worry about food and clothing, but it is not to the point where they can squander money at will. "Money, I don't need it. If you need it, I can give you some. I don't exaggerate, my annual income is billions of dollars. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a guest of honor at the Blue House, right?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head. It is not his style to ask a woman for money, so he directly said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran couldn't help but sigh. She knew that foreigners who can come here are definitely not people that can be bought with money, but besides money, she really didn't know what else she could give him. "Then, what exactly do you want?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiaran was a little discouraged because she really didn't know what to do. Looking at Jiang Hai pitifully, she was really a little confused now. "Let me think about it. If I think about it, I will call you. Is the number you are calling your number?" Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also wanted to tease her, so he shook his phone at her and said to her. "Well, this is my number. If you have any requests, you can call me at any time, please." Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Han Jiaran also stood up and bowed respectfully. Jiang Hai looked at her appearance and chuckled. He has to admit that sometimes teasing these women is quite interesting, just as Jiang Hai was teasing Han Jiaran here. On the other side of Kim Taeyan's house, Kim Taeyan and Lin Yuner were at home. Chapter 836. What's the matter? Lin Yun, who was watching TV and eating, asked Jean Taeyan next to her. Lin Yun was a girl who liked to eat very much, and she had a good appetite. She liked to eat, especially when she was sad these 2 days. She had to eat a lot every day. She didn't know if she would get fat. Maybe it was to avoid Li Xingji, but she really didn't have the face to see him now. So when Lin Yun arrived at Jean Taeyan's house, she had already turned off her phone. Now only Jean Taeyan's phone was ringing. In order not to let Li Xingji find her, Jean Taeyan had also muted her phone these days. If it wasn't someone close to them, they really couldn't find them. But now, she had to look at this text message. Hearing Lin Yun's words, Jean Taeyan also hesitated, and then threw the phone aside. Nothing, just a text message from the company. Hearing what Jean Taeyan said, Lin Yun was stunned for a moment. Then, she glanced at Jean Taeyan, and then instantly snatched the phone. She opened the phone and found that it was indeed a text message from the company. It was just that what was said in the text message was not as simple as Jean Taeyan thought. Because it was an invitation to a cocktail party. Compared to the order a few days ago, today's words were much softer. But when she saw the words above, Lin Yun's body still trembled unconsciously. Because it was written very clearly that the guest she was accompanying was Jiang Hai. They had already experienced what it meant to accompany Jiang Hai, hadn't they? We can ignore them. After all, we have sacrificed the day before yesterday. Don't be afraid. Everything will pass. Looking at Lin Yun's appearance, Jean Taiyan also sighed, then hugged Lin Yun next to her and said anxiously. She was really afraid that something would happen to her sister. At the same time, she hated her company and that Li Shihuai. Were these guys going to continue to humiliate her like this? After the first time, they still wanted the second time? Would there be a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time in the future? Thinking of this, she couldn't help but grit her teeth. She wouldn't do this. Even if she had to fight to the death, she wouldn't let these people have it easy. No, I want to go. However, at this moment, Lin Yun suddenly raised her head. Tears had already covered her face, but her voice was still very firm. She looked at Jean Taiyan and said with a serious face. But. Hearing that she was going, Jean Taiyan was at a loss. What was she going to do in such a situation? I want to see what these guys can do. Hearing what Jean Taiyan wanted to say, Lin Yuner interrupted her and then said with a serious face. Seeing the anger in her eyes and the feeling of anger, Jean Taiyan sighed helplessly. Indeed, she didn't know what to do now. If Lin Yun wanted to go, then she had to accompany her. She also wanted to see what Jiang Hai and the others were going to do. It was because the Chinese food here couldn't be considered Chinese food to cater to the local customers. What appetizers, what soup, and so on, Jiang Hai had eaten them before. Naturally, he also introduced them in detail, so he didn't say much here. The food was also served separately, but it wasn't like the last time, where there was only one person at a table. Instead, it was an oversized long table, and Jiang Hai and the others sat on both sides of it. It could be seen that the people on both sides weren't very nice. Opposite Jiang Hai was Li Shihuai, the representative he met today, 3 people he met at Qingwadai, and 3 women. A total of 8 people. On Jiang Hai's side, there was only Jiang Hai and Cheryl Li. After Azalina came back, she went to rest. She wasn't interested in these things. On the other hand, Cheryl Li liked to join in the fun. Therefore, she came along with Jiang Hai. Looking at the high officials in front of her, she was very proud. But at this time, the door of the Western restaurant was pushed open. 2 women she had seen before walked in reluctantly. Chapter 837. Oh. Our teenage years are here. Come, sit down, the dishes haven't been served yet. Seeing the 2 of them walk in, Li Shihuai couldn't help but smile and say. Speaking of which, he was really grateful to these 2 girls. If it weren't for them, then he would have suffered a terrible loss, and his family would have to pay for it. It was just that they sacrificed a little, and he had to pay $10 million instead of $100 million. This was 10 times the difference, $10 million. Although this was not a small sum of money, he could still afford it. Department Headley, we have already done what we should do, what else do you want us to do? But after hearing his words, Lin Yun did not sit down as he said, but still stood at the door and looked at Li Shihuai angrily. Hearing her words that were 70% sarcastic and 30% angry, the atmosphere in the whole room instantly stagnated. What do you mean by this? Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face also became ugly, and he looked at the 2 people in front of him with an unhappy face. At the same time, he tore off the cloth that had been wrapped around his collar and said with a cold face. What do you mean? It's the meaning behind your words. What do you think we are? Do you think we are people who can come and go as you wish? When did we become your playthings? Yuni, don't stop me, I want to make it clear today. Yes, you won't let us have a good time, do you think we will let you have a good time? At most, we'll fight to the death and go our separate ways. Hearing Li Shihuai's words, Lin Yun couldn't help but curse, probably because of what happened that day. Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face became darker and darker. If word got out that he threatened popular female celebrities to drink and sleep with them, then this political scandal was enough for the higher-ups of South Korea to drag him down. To be able to sit in this position, it could be said that he must have made a lot of enemies. If he went down, he could indeed destroy these two families, but he would really be finished. In the eyes of these people, his life was much more precious than these female celebrities. What equality! This sentence was just for show. If a poor person committed a murder, even if it was a manslaughter, they would have to stay in prison for more than 10 years. However, if it was a rich person, even if it was a murder, they wouldn't even have to go to prison. Since ancient times, all crows in the world were equally black. This was also an unchanging truth. Just like what the Westerners said, everyone had the 7 deadly sins in their bones. This was also the nature of human beings. Lust, unless they had some special hobby or were congenitally deficient, who wouldn't like this kind of thing? Just like Jiang Hai, he admitted that he had a strong desire in that aspect. Gluttony, in Dante's Divine Comedy, was also called coveting pleasure. Who wouldn't covet such things? Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. He really wanted to stand up and go back, but after thinking about it, it seemed that this was not very good. Looking around, Jiang Hai waved to the waiter over there, and then said something. In less than a minute, a bunch of keys appeared in Jiang Hai's hand. Jiang Hai didn't know whether to laugh or cry, he just wanted to borrow a car, but this kid seemed to be very helpful. He directly gave Jiang Hai a Rolls-Royce. Jiang Hai glanced at the car and then went to the parking lot. Not long after, a Rolls-Royce stopped in front of the two. Come on in. Although I can't call out your names now, you are public figures after all. If you are photographed sitting here crying, it will probably affect your career. I'll take you home. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kim Taeyen couldn't help but hesitate. After all, there was a grudge between them and Jiang Hai. Let's go. It's a waste if we don't take it. I've already been, what is there to be afraid of? But Lin Yun seemed to be going all out. She wiped her tears and then directly pulled Kim Taeyen into the back seat of the car. After closing the door, Jiang Hai also shrugged. He was really looking for something to do. But since he had already said it, he was embarrassed to go back like this. He could only start the engine and drive forward. But they didn't notice that when the car drove away, a few lights flashed in the grass in the distance. Chapter 838. Have we arrived? Looking at Jean Taeyen, who ordered him to stop, Jiang Hai asked the two people in the back seat with some doubts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people also looked at him. They didn't say anything and just stared at him, making Jiang Hai feel a little embarrassed. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai is not a saint, but he is not a heartless person. Now seeing them in so much pain and struggling, to be honest, he is a little embarrassed. We haven't arrived yet, say something. Seeing that the two of them didn't speak, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head, then said helplessly. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the two of them also took a deep breath. Don't think that we will thank you and forgive you just because you sent us back. Looking at Jiang Hai, Jean Taeyen thought for a while and said first. In fact, her thoughts about Jiang Hai are indeed a little strange, but even if Jiang Hai pretends to be a good person now, he can't get their forgiveness. After all, Jiang Hai did such an excessive thing to them. To be honest, I don't need your words of gratitude and forgiveness, because to a certain extent, I don't owe you anything. After all, I have done what I promised you. Hearing what Jean Taeyen said, Jiang Hai shrugged. He has always been a donkey that goes with the flow. If you go against him, there will be no good result. You bastard. Then why did you send us back, bastard? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yuner couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shrugged lightly. Maybe I suddenly owed you, but whether you are grateful to me or not, whether you forgive me or not, it doesn't matter to me because I will probably leave South Korea the day after tomorrow, and then I probably won't be able to come back in this life." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also shrugged. To be honest, there is really nothing for Jiang Hai to miss in South Korea. You scum." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two couldn't help but be stunned. Then Kim Taeyen opened the door, said something to Jiang Hai, and left with Lin Yun. After getting out of the car, the two seemed to be afraid that Jiang Hai would follow them. They ran directly into the darkness. Jiang Hai looked at their backs and couldn't help but curl his lips. Scum? Is there a scum like me? It seems that I am indeed quite a scum. Forget it, scum is scum. But this nickname is a little unfair. After all, I haven't done anything too scum. Looking at the two disappearing, Jiang Hai curled his lips and sat in the driver's seat self-deprecatingly. Looking at the night scenery outside, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile helplessly. I didn't even have dinner. I will eat after going back to the hotel. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai was about to start the engine and go back, but just as he was about to leave, the door of the villa in front of him suddenly opened. Then a young woman in casual clothes walked out with some garbage and threw it into the trash can on the roadside, waiting for the garbage truck to take it away tomorrow. Looking at this young woman, Jiang Hai suddenly froze. Because this woman, he actually knew her. Scum? Then let's see what scum do. Recalling the words of the two people just now, Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Then he got out of the car and slowly walked to the front of the villa. After the young woman just threw the garbage, she had already gone back. Jiang Hai walked to the front of the villa, picked up the phone, and dialed the number on it. Dudu, Yamasayo, hello? Maybe. After the phone rang twice, a female voice came from the other side of the phone. Listening to this familiar female voice, Jiang Hai also chuckled. It's me. Facing the female voice on the phone, Jiang Hai said very plainly. I know, what's the matter? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female voice on the other side was obviously anxious. She lowered her voice and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. It seems that she is very afraid of me. I suddenly have something to tell you. Can you please open the door? Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai said with a smile, and hearing what Jiang Hai said, the woman was clearly stunned. What do you mean? After thinking about it, she asked Jiang Hai directly. It means literally, I'm outside your house. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also chuckled and said. Bang! After Jiang Hai said this, the female voice on the other side also hung up the phone instantly. After waiting for about 10 seconds, the door opened. In front of Jiang Hai, a frightened face appeared. The owner of the face is called Han Jiren. Why are you here? Did you investigate me, or did you follow me? No matter what the reason is, please leave immediately, my husband is at home. Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiren said to him in a trembling voice. At the same time, she lowered her voice for fear of being heard by others, and her eyes were full of panic. Don't be too nervous, I just happened to pass by here and saw you taking out the trash. I don't have any malice, I'm just a little hungry, so I came to find something to eat. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled and shrugged at her. You just want to eat? Hearing Jiang Hai's shameless remarks, Han Jiren really didn't know what to say, but she didn't dare to be too excited to anger Jiang Hai or attract other people, so she could only ask while gritting her teeth. Of course. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded and said to her with a smile. Then, come in. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, she glanced back upstairs, then said softly. Then she stepped aside and let Jiang Hai in. After Jiang Hai came in, he didn't make any sound. After changing his shoes, he looked at this small villa. He has to admit that this small villa is really exquisite, it has a homey feeling. Where are your husband and child? Looking at Han Jiren who came back, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. My husband drank and is sleeping upstairs. The child is with my mother. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran also lowered her voice and said to Jiang Hai, then she didn't give him any face and went straight into the kitchen. And Jiang Hai looked at her, touched his chin, then followed her into the kitchen. There are only ramen and rice cakes. Can I cook ramen with rice cakes? Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Han Jiaran, who opened the refrigerator door and looked around, raised her head, holding 2 packs of shinramen and a box of rice cakes in her hand, and asked Jiang Hai. Yes. Jiang Hai never liked to eat instant noodles, but now is not the time to be picky, so he said with a smile. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran also began to cook. As for Jiang Hai, he was looking at this small villa. There are 3 rooms on the first floor of the small villa. One of them is a large bathroom, and the other one should be a children's room, because the floor of the room is made of foam, with English letters and some patterns on it, making it convenient for children to crawl on it. The other room should be the reception room, and in addition, there is the kitchen. At the same time, Jiang Hai also came upstairs quietly. There are 3 rooms upstairs, but they are all occupied. Among them, a man is sleeping in the largest bedroom at this time. This man has a big nose and single eyelids. He is not handsome, but he is a little handsome, at least in Jiang Hai's eyes. He is very ordinary. It seems that this person should be Han Jiaran's husband. Why are you here? Just when Jiang Hai saw her husband there, Han Jiaran suddenly appeared behind Jiang Hai, then pulled Jiang Hai's clothes, and whispered nervously and fearfully. Come and see my enemy. Looking at Han Jiaran's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Suddenly, he wanted to tease her. After saying this, he directly pulled her into his arms, then lowered his head and kissed her. When Han Jiaran was attacked by Jiang Hai, her first thought was to struggle away, but after struggling for a while, she saw her husband through the gap of the door. Her struggling suddenly stopped, because she was afraid that if she moved too much, she would wake her husband up. She could only stand there stiffly, and let Jiang Hai attack her. And soon, Jiang Hai was not satisfied with just the lips, and his hands began to attack her. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Han Jiaran's shame, fear, she actually had a trace of feeling that she should not have, and her legs unconsciously clamped together. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai's hand also slid down, but at this time, Han Jiaran suddenly pushed Jiang Hai away. Do you still want to eat noodles? If not, then leave. Looking at Jiang Hai, she panted and said to him angrily. Eat, of course. Not only do I want to eat noodles, I also want to eat you. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai leaned over and said to her. You rogue, you bastard. No, not here. Feeling Jiang Hai leaning over again, Han Jiaran was also embarrassed and angry, but she found that it was impossible to point at Jiang Hai's conscience now, so she could only grit her teeth and say to Jiang Hai. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. If it can't be here, it proves that it can be somewhere else. Jiang Hai has never been a good person, he is also very sure of this. Now that the arrow is on the bow, he has to shoot. How can he be polite? He picked up Han Jiaran, quickly went to the first floor, and entered the empty children's room. At this time, Han Jiaran's husband, who was sleeping upstairs, frowned slightly. He seemed to feel something in his sleep. Chapter 839. Hello, Jiang Hai, what are you doing? Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. A few years ago, this voice was more familiar to Jiang Hai than Chili because the owner of the voice was also one of his best friends, Su Wei. I'm in South Korea. I'm here to talk about some things. What's the matter? Hearing Su Wei's familiar voice, Jiang Hai asked him. He hadn't seen Su Wei for more than half a year. During the new year, he went back and played with them. After that, Su Wei stayed in the United States and didn't go back for a while. Xiang Hua's wife is about to give birth. Do you know? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also said to Xiang Hua. Oh, I heard about it. Is she about to give birth? When Jiang Hai returned to China, Xiang Hua's wife was confirmed to be pregnant. Now that he thought about it, the expected date of birth seemed to be in the near future. Well, he was too embarrassed to ask if you were coming back, so I called you to ask. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei couldn't help but smile and say. Indeed, this matter was not like a wedding. This gift couldn't be avoided. If he called to give birth to a child, it would be like asking for a gift, so Xiang Hua was too embarrassed. Of course, in fact, even if Jiang Hai knew about it, the gift would not be too expensive. First, Jiang Hai was not a spendthrift. Money and other things were given for free. For example, when others got married, he gave 100,000 yuan. If he had something to do, others would give 500 yuan back. Jiang Hai didn't care. He was not such a person. Second, they didn't pay attention to this. They paid attention to the number of gifts they gave, and all their friends gave the same number of gifts. Whether you have money or not, the gifts are the same. Everyone has to live by themselves. People can't expect others to live. Therefore, when Jiang Hai's buddies got married, Jiang Hai always gave them the same amount of money. He didn't pretend to be rich, and when he was really suffering, he didn't borrow a single cent from his buddies. This was the dignity of a human being. As long as he could endure and cross this hurdle, he would not open his mouth. That was the kind of person he was. If someone was here, he would say it out loud. How could he still be considered a good friend if he made such a clear distinction? Jiang Hai wanted to say that it was precisely because they were good friends that they had to separate things clearly. Of course, it depended on what it was. For example, if you went out to eat or play, it didn't matter who had more money. But if you were borrowing money, since you were good friends, you had to think for the other party. If he lent you money, would his family be unwilling to accept it? Definitely. No matter if it was his parents or his wife, they would definitely say something. Since borrowing money from others is a burden to his family, why should he borrow money from others? Therefore, unless Jiang Hai said that someone in his family was going to have an operation tomorrow and he didn't have enough money, he wouldn't borrow money from others even if he were to sell his house and land. His friends were basically in the same way. Go back, when? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai calculated in his heart and asked him. Go back, when? About this half a month? After thinking for a while, Su Wei said with uncertainty. It should be fine. After I finish my business in South Korea, I will also go back to China. I will make a trip back to Bing City then. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Su Wei with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also responded. Then the two chatted for a while and hung up the phone. After watching Jiang Hai hang up the phone, the people on the other side came over. What's the matter? Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai said to him with a smile. Nothing. Whose turn is it? Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him. It's your turn. I'm on the green. Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai also said with a smile. Last night, after he had a meal at Han Jia's house, he went back to the hotel. Just after he came back, Cheryl Li told him that because he didn't have a good dinner today, Li Shihuai invited Jiang Hai to go out to play in their own name tomorrow. He asked Jiang Hai what he wanted to play, whether it was golf or fishing. To be honest, rich people only did that sort of thing. Fishing in the sea, playing golf, riding a horse, and so on. There are many horses in Jiang Hai's manor, and he also has a shire horse. Going to sea? He is about to vomit from sitting on a boat. So there is nothing fun about going to sea. As for playing golf, Jiang Hai has never played before, so he agreed to go and have a look. Early this morning, after Jiang Hai had breakfast, he took Cheryl Li and Azalina to a car arranged by Li Shihuai and went to a golf course near Seoul. After Jiang Hai tried out how to hit the ball, they went straight to the actual practice. Playing golf is not as simple as imagined. It is really difficult for people who have never practiced to hit that small ball. Moreover, it is not easy to control the strength. At the same time, there are quite a lot of golf clubs. Jiang Hai has never played this before, so he is not clear about it. Fortunately, Li Shihuai is a person who often plays this kind of thing. So under his guidance, Jiang Hai slowly figured out some tricks. At the same time, he directly bought a set. It is definitely the top club in South Korea. In the future, he can play by himself when he has nothing to do. While he was on the phone, Su Wei called him. After Jiang Hai picked up the call, he continued to make calls. Originally, Jiang Hai planned to come to South Korea for 3 to 5 days. If there is really any relationship announcement, it should be with one person, not two people. There are also people who directly think that this might be the management company's hype. Other than these people who know but will not say it, or will not think this way at all, there are also some people who know something but will not say it. For example, Li Shengji. When he saw the two women at the Shilla Hotel the day before yesterday, his sixth sense told him that he had been cheated on. Therefore, he frantically called Lin Yun's phone number, wanting to know why, or he wanted to have a clear answer. Unfortunately, after calling for 2 days, he still could not beat her. When he went to the company to look for her, she was not at the company. When he went to wait for her outside her house, she did not go home. This made him quite angry, but as an artist, he also had his own reasons. Although he felt that his heart was about to explode, he still had to attend an event today. Actually, rather than an event, it would be better to call it a party because the person who organized this event was the 4th generation of the Li family. In order to show his positive image, every year, this person would come out to find some celebrities, donate money, do shows, and so on. There were no reporters filming, but it would be published in the newspapers. This was also positive news, so he would not let it go. Chapter 840. Hey, Xingji, here. Li Xingji had just arrived at the gathering place in his van, a golf course near Seoul. Many people looked at him, and he quickly sorted out his mood in the car, and then walked out of the car with a smile. As soon as he got out of the car, someone shouted at him. Hearing the owner of this voice, Li Xingji also looked at the other party, and then the smile on his face became bigger, but there was a trace of disgust in his eyes. He also knew the person who came over. His name is MC Meng. He used to be second to none in South Korea's hip-hop industry, but South Korea had military service. He once escaped the military service, and after he came back, the public didn't buy it very much. So he has always hoped to enter people's eyes through some activities. Li Xingji and him were related mainly because they were both hosts of 2 Days and 1 Night. But to be honest, the currently popular Li Xingji didn't really like this older brother of his. But on the surface, they still had to maintain harmony. Brother, you came so early. Looking at MC Meng who came over, Li Xingji also said politely. Hey, I have nothing to do anyway, so I came over to take a look first, but today, there are really a lot of seniors and actors. You can help to introduce them later. Hearing Li Xingji's words, MC Meng said with a smile. Hearing what he said, although Li Xingji was smiling on his face, he was sneering in his heart. The two of them slowly walked into the golf club as if they were really familiar with each other. Li Xingji couldn't help but nod his head when he saw it. He was indeed worthy of being the legitimate heir of the 3-star Li family. His charisma was far from what ordinary people could compare to. There are a lot of artists who were invited like Li Xingji. Even Han Jia, who had just given birth a while ago and had not yet returned, came with her husband. Everyone was wearing golf clothes at this time, and they were chatting. The most dazzling person in the crowd was naturally today's host, Li Zhihao. Seeing Li Xingji coming, Li Zhihao also greeted him with a smile. Xingji is here. Looking at Li Xingji, Li Zhihao smiled and said. In fact, the relationship between the two was very good. Of course, Li Xingji didn't have the qualifications to be a good friend of the 3-star crown prince. They had a good relationship, but no one knew why. Perhaps it was because they hit it off, or perhaps it was because, after knowing who Li Xingji's girlfriend was, Li Zhihao felt that he would definitely make friends with this person. Mr. Li, Hearing his words, Li Xingji immediately said with a smile on his face. MC Meng next to him, after seeing his appearance and Li Zhihao, didn't know what to say. After all, he was eager to get close to such a person, but he couldn't say anything to such a person. He could only look at Li Xingji. Li Xingji nodded. However, it was obvious that Li Xingji had no intention of introducing this person to his brother. I saw the news yesterday. Is there anything wrong? Looking at Li Xingji, Li Zhihao asked with concern. As for why he cared so much, no one knew. Perhaps it was just a form of concern. There's nothing wrong. I just went to the audition, but the result was not ideal. He naturally knew what Li Zhihao was talking about, but now he couldn't say anything else. He could only respond with a smile. Hearing his words, Li Zhihao also smiled. However, just as they were about to say something, some people suddenly came in from outside. Seeing these people coming in, many people in the hall looked at them, and the people over there also looked at them. When their eyes met, many people's faces showed a trace of expression, but they concealed it very well. For example, Li Xingji saw two people he was very familiar with among those people, Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai. At the same time, in the crowd, Han Jia also saw Jiang Hai and remembered what had happened last night and the night before. Her gaze was somewhat evasive, but she knew that this was not the time to panic. After all, her husband was still by her side, so she forcibly suppressed her desire to avoid his gaze and looked elsewhere. Li Zhihao also looked at Jiang Hai, because he also knew Jiang Hai. He didn't know if anyone had any impression of him. Jiang Hai and Li Zhihao once had a feud. The reason for their feud was in Atlantic City. When Jiang Hai went to look for Du Feiman happened to be playing cards there. Li Zhihao was one of them, and he took a fancy to Prawalton. Some unpleasant things happened between him and Jiang Hai, but after returning, he was warned not to cause trouble for Jiang Hai. However, at this time, when he saw Jiang Hai here, he couldn't help but squint his eyes, but he soon gave up. It was impossible for him not to know that Jiang Hai was here, and the reason why he didn't dare to do anything was because he knew that he couldn't touch Jiang Hai now. Not to mention him, even his father couldn't touch Jiang Hai, because to some extent, Jiang Hai was now doing business with South Korea. If he made Jiang Hai unhappy, his family would also suffer losses. Therefore, he only glanced at Jiang Hai, then looked away. The people on both sides didn't seem to interfere with each other, and they just brushed past each other. Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai went to the balcony on the second floor together. They were going to rest there. Jiang Hai and the others came early this morning, and they had already played 2 rounds just now. To be honest, Jiang Hai was still fine, but Li Shihuai's physical strength was already a little exhausted. Jiang Hai wasn't particularly interested in this sport, so he suggested that they take a rest, and Li Shihuai naturally wouldn't disagree. This hall was one of the main halls of the golf club. The ethnic culture of South Korea was inherited from Wuxia. Naturally, they were also very interested in tea, but unfortunately, whether it was South Korea or another country with an inheritance, Japan, they didn't produce much tea. However, Japan played with matcha, so their tea ceremony was still quite famous in the world. As for the South Korea side, they really don't understand tea. However, those officials, especially the high-ranking officials, are bound to be cultured. Just like Li Shihuai, he also drinks tea. However, his tea leaves, which are usually envied by others, are inferior to Jiang Hai's tea. Jiang Hai prefers West Lake Longjing, and these tea leaves were also planted by him. After brewing, the extremely unusual aroma instantly made Li Shihuai lose his composure. Give Minister Li some tea leaves to try. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. He has these things. Chapter 841. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Li Xingji was dumbfounded. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Xinlua Hotel, his girlfriend, the crying figure that night, when Jiang Hai's car drove away, it was as if all these things had overlapped. When he thought of this, his brain was about to explode. What kind of F***king melodramatic scene was this? Wasn't this something that only appeared in those bloody NTR stories? Why did it appear in his body? When he thought of this, he felt that his breathing was not very smooth. His vision darkened and he was about to sit down, but fortunately, he held on. Now, he felt that there was a ball of fire burning in his mouth. His eyes instantly turned red. Now, his first thought was to take a knife and cut Jiang Hai and Lin Yun, this pair of B***stards. Especially Lin Yun, When she was with him, she made all kinds of excuses. What about acting on TV? It didn't count. What about being inexperienced? What about being unfamiliar? These were all nonsense. Could it be that the skills she learned on TV were all given to Jiang Hai? That B***tch, that B***starred. Li Xingji's whole body was trembling as he recalled Jiang Hai and Lin Yun's appearance. It was hard for him to imagine and accept this. He had been cuckolded. Thinking of this, he really had the urge to die. Fortunately, he was a very utilitarian person and was very open-minded. Li Xingji might not be good at other things, singing, dancing, and acting. After all, you couldn't ask an actor who didn't even have acting skills to sing well, right? But his plan for his life was really good, and it was also very strong. He belonged to the wolf type of person. As long as he was given a chance, he would succeed no matter what. He would not allow Jiang Hai to ruin his career, and that included Lin Yun. Therefore, he quickly took 2 deep breaths and suppressed the anger in his heart. He forcibly adjusted his expression and revealed a smile once again. Then, he walked back into the club, but he kept texting Lin Yun. Unfortunately, Lin Yun did not reply. But this time, he would not give up so easily. In fact, he already knew that Lin Yun was at Kim Taeyan's house. The reason why he didn't go to find her was, firstly, to avoid awkwardness, and secondly, to leave some face for both parties. But now, he had to go. After Li Zhihao returned, he told Li Zhihao that he was not feeling well and left. First, he went back to the company to get his car. After putting on a disguise, he drove to Kim Taeyan's apartment. For a team like Girls' Generation, they naturally had their own dorm room. But to be honest, after they became popular a few years ago, almost no one lived in a dorm room anymore. After the 9 people became 8 people that year, the dormitory became even more deserted, so basically no one would stay in the dormitory. Unless it was very late at night and there was no place to stay, the dormitory would always be empty. And the company naturally couldn't take back the dormitory. This was also one of their privileges. Li Xingji drove to a roadside shop and bought some food casually. After eating lunch, Li Xingji drove to the gate of the community where Kim Taeyan lived. He waited from noon to night until about 5:00 in the evening. When he couldn't wait any longer and was about to knock on Kim Taeyan's door, the 2 figures appeared outside the community. Seeing that the 2 had finally appeared, Li Xingji breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately got out of the car and came to the 2. Although the 2 were wrapped tightly and didn't have any makeup on, ordinary passers-by wouldn't be able to recognize them. However, Li Xingji was very familiar with one of them, so he stopped them in front of the 2 in a few steps. Xingji, Appa. Seeing the person in front of her, Lin Yun was stunned for a moment, then she said somewhat woodenly. Kim Taeyan looked at Li Xingji in front of her, but there was a trace of vigilance in her eyes. She knew very well that Li Xingji was very smart and very conceited. He should have guessed most of what happened that day, but she didn't know that he hadn't appeared in the past few days. But now that he appeared, it was destined to not be a good thing. She didn't want Lin Yun to get hurt again. Looking at the 2 in front of him, Li Xingji really didn't know what to say at this time. Looking at the innocent Lin Yun in front of him, he really wanted to go up and slap her, and then tell her, "You bitch, I already know about your scandal." But he resisted because he knew that if he said that, his career would be over. As long as Lin Yun didn't appear in front of Jiang Hai tonight, then Jiang Hai would call Li Shihuai and he would be completely finished. So now he had to beg this woman who made him a cuckold and beg her to save him. But there was really no way to say these words when they were at the tip of his tongue, especially when there was a woman beside him. Xingji appa, what's the matter? Looking at the silent and extremely awkward atmosphere in front of her, Kim Tae-yun thought for a while and said to Li Xingji. Hearing her words, Li Xingji calmed down a little and smiled at her. Tae-yun, can you let me talk to Yun alone? Looking at Kim Tae-yun, Li Xingji asked her. Li Xingji was born in 1987, and Kim Tae-yun was born in 1989. The two also knew each other because of Lin Yun, so it didn't matter if they called each other by name. Hearing Li Xingji's words, Kim Tae-yun also looked at Lin Yun. Oni, wait for me. Hearing Li Xingji's words, Lin Yun also calmed down. She had to face this matter eventually. Taking a deep breath, after Lin Yun persuaded Kim Tae-yun to leave, she motioned for Li Xingji to go to the side to talk. Chapter 842. Since you're here, let's go in. Looking at Lin Yun in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and walked into his room. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Lin Yun also sighed. It seemed that tonight, this matter would not end well. But then she laughed at herself. This kind of thing, if it happened once, there would be a second time. And this time, it was the man she thought was the closest to her who pushed her into this pit of fire. Tightening her clothes, Lin Yun walked into Jiang Hai's room. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, she closed her eyes. I said that I won't force others to do anything. If you don't want to, you can leave at any time. Looking at her, Jiang Hai sat on the ground, looked at her, and said very plainly. I only hope that after tonight, everything will return to its original state. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yun spoke in strange English to Jiang Hai, but her eyes were full of determination. Then she took off her coat in front of Jiang Hai, revealing her perfect figure. As you wish. Looking at Lin Yun's serious look, Jiang Hai also smiled and walked over. There was no need to describe in detail what happened after that. That night, Lin Yun didn't even know when she fell asleep. But to be honest, apart from the inner entanglement, she was still quite attached to Jiang Hai. That feeling of attacking her soul really made her unable to stop. When she woke up the next day, she was the only one left in the room. The traces of the existence of Jiang Hai and others had disappeared at this time. She only found Jiang Hai's business card beside her. At the same time, there was an address. She understood what Jiang Hai meant. This was to tell her that if there was anything in the future, she could call this number or go to this place. Although she really wanted to throw these two things away, Lin Yun somehow stuffed these two things into her clothes. Then, she packed up and left the hotel. Looking at the rare sunlight outside, she didn't know if the matter had come to an end. In fact, it was indeed so. Since Lin Yun had already come yesterday, Lin Yun didn't know if it was the end of the matter. Jiang Hai couldn't hold on to an artist, so when he left this morning, he called Li Shihuai and told him that Li Xingji didn't have to target him anymore. It was best to take care of Lin Yun and Kim Tae-yun. In order to thank him for his help, Jiang Hai added 10 tons and 100 tons of fodder to the annual 90 tons of Southern Gaoli. Of course, he didn't add this thing because he had slept with a few girls here. It was because he originally wanted to sell these. This could be considered as taking a step back in order to advance. Unfortunately, the people of Southern Gaoli were still cheering for this. When they arrived at the Incheon airport, Azalina, Galina, Hua Lizi, Cheryl, as well as the staff and 2 bodyguards, boarded the plane that Jiang Hai had specially rented. He was already thinking about whether he should get a plane for himself. But even if he had such thoughts, he would have to wait until he returned to the United States. After watching everyone leave, he bought a first-class ticket and flew directly from Southern Gaoli to the capital of Wuxia. Southern Gaoli wasn't far from Wuxia. At least, it was much closer than flying to the United States. Jiang Hai seemed to have just sat on the plane for a while, and the plane had already informed him that it was about to land. After waiting for a while, the plane landed at the capital airport. Jiang Hai carried his luggage, a backpack, and walked out of the airport's special passage. Jiang Hai didn't like to take too many things with him when he went out. In his backpack, there was only a set of clothes, a few pairs of underwear, and a mobile phone charger. That was all, so a small backpack could fit everything. If he needed something, he would spend money to buy it. In any case, he had plenty of money now. After leaving the capital airport, Jiang Hai took a taxi and went directly to the Qi Li group. After waiting for a while, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at this huge building. To be honest, this seemed to be the first time Jiang Hai came to Qi Li's company. In the past, he had only seen it in some photos at most. Now it seemed that this Qi group was really terrifying. Unlike ordinary companies that rented office buildings, the Qi group itself occupied a huge office building. There was only one company in the whole building, the Qi group. This building was built by Qi Li's father. The location was a little remote, not in the second ring road, but on the side of the third ring road. When building this building, the Qi group spent a lot of money to approve the land and construction. This was also the building of the Qi group at its peak. This building was worth 10 billion yuan, of course, in RMB. Although this building wasn't very tall, it was really a feeling to see such a building here. After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the huge building in front of him and clicked his tongue. Thinking about himself in the past, it seemed that he really didn't match Qi Li very well. But now, Jiang Hai could afford such a building. After sorting out his backpack, Jiang Hai walked towards the Qi group building in front of him and came to the front desk. At this time, no one knew who Jiang Hai was, so basically everyone turned a blind eye to Jiang Hai. "Hello, how can I help you?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, a beautiful girl at the front desk here asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also came over. "Sorry to trouble you, I'm looking for Qi Li." Looking at the girl, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile. "Looking for President Qi? Do you have an appointment?" Hearing that Jiang Hai was looking for Qi Li, the receptionist here was stunned for a moment, then asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. With her memory, she didn't seem to have seen Jiang Hai before. "No, I'll have to trouble you to make a phone call. My name is Jiang Hai." Hearing the receptionist's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to her. Maybe because Jiang Hai's attitude was good, the receptionist didn't avoid Jiang Hai and directly called Qi Li's office with an internal phone. Since Zheng Jin left, Qi Li's assistants became two. One is Du Ning, and the other is a promoted person, but whether it is Du Ning or this person, they all know Jiang Hai. After learning that Jiang Hai came, Du Ning immediately told the news to Qi Li. "Jiang Hai is here?" A few days ago, Jiang Hai said that he would come to see her, but he didn't say the specific time. Now that he suddenly appeared in the building, even Qi Li was stunned. Then a smile quickly flashed on her face. She stopped reading the documents and jumped out of the office. She took her exclusive elevator and went directly to the first floor. After getting off the elevator, she saw Jiang Hai standing not far from the front desk playing with his mobile phone. She couldn't help but speed up her pace. Before Jiang Hai could react, a pair of small hands covered Jiang Hai's eyes. "Guess who I am?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was stunned for a moment, Qi Li deliberately changed her voice and asked Jiang Hai. Who else can it be?" Qi Li. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned for a moment. If he was a veteran in love now, he would definitely tease Qi Li, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai really didn't feel anything about this, so he just said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's unromantic words, Qi Li still didn't care and let go of her hand with a smile. Then with a smile on her face, she hugged Jiang Hai happily, and Jiang Hai turned around and touched her hair. Seeing the scene in front of them, to be honest, the glasses of the whole company almost fell off. Qi Li had always been known as the cold-faced queen in the company. She had the capital to be arrogant, young, beautiful, and powerful. If she wasn't arrogant, who would be arrogant? But such a queen-like woman was quite popular with modern men. Although they heard that Qi Li was married, few people in the company had seen Jiang Hai, so many of them secretly fantasized about Qi Li. But now, Jiang Hai and Qi Li's actions had completely oppressed these people. Regardless of whether they were men or women, they were all stunned at this time. The men came because their dreams were broken, and the women were simply surprised because they had never seen such a smiling Chi Li. At the same time, they also became interested in this man who could make Chi Li put down her pride. At this time, Chi Li only had eyes for Jiang Hai. She didn't care about showing affection to Jiang Hai in front of others. Why didn't you tell me you were back? I could have picked you up. Let's go upstairs and rest first. What are they doing here? Hearing Du Ning's words, Chi Li thought for a moment, then said to Du Ning outside the door, "Let them come in." Then, she gave Jiang Hai a look, telling Jiang Hai to watch out for a while. Then, she walked back to her seat and pretended to check documents. Not long after she sat down, the door of the office opened, and 5 people came in from outside. Jiang Hai knew these 5 people. The leader was Chi Li, who was known as Chi Song's elder, but in fact, he wasn't her biological elder. He could only be regarded as the elder of the family. Behind him was Chi Yuanlong, Chi Li's third uncle, who was also a lazy guy. Behind the two of them were their sons, Chi Liangkai and Chi Jingtao. At the end of the line was Chi Jingtao's wife, who could be considered the only one in Chi Yuanlong's family who was more business-minded. Her name was Lu Si. Jiang Hai had seen these people before during the Chinese New Year. At that time, Chi Song's family had leaned towards the Yin family. He didn't know what these guys were doing here. Thinking of this, his hand, which was originally holding the food, relaxed. He just sat on the sofa and looked at these people in front of him. When these people came in, they also saw Jiang Hai and Chi Li at a glance. The older you get, the more unruly you become. Seeing that they had come in, Chi Li and Jiang Hai didn't even move. Chi Song's face was a little ugly. He usually liked to take advantage of his seniority and didn't do anything, but he still wanted others to respect him. "Shaoli, your uncle is here. Why aren't you greeting him?" Hearing Chi Song's unhappy words, Chi Yuanlong chuckled. Hearing what he said, Chi Li's face showed a trace of disdain and a sneer. "Uncle, third uncle, you don't come without a reason. If you have something to say, just say it. Your niece is still very busy here." Chi Li looked at the 2 people in front of her with a hand supporting her chin. She didn't speak and said calmly, "You. Okay, then let's talk about business. I came this time to see Jiang Hai. After all, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Secondly, I just want to ask you why Liang Kai's proposal was stopped." Seeing that Chi Li in front of him didn't want to talk to him, Chi Song almost went berserk. He remembered his purpose, suppressed the thoughts in his heart, and then said to Chi Li. Hearing what he said, Chi Li couldn't help but chuckle. "Thank you for your concern, uncle." Hearing Chi Li's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded. He naturally knew about the Chi family's affairs. If Chi Li's father was still here, then they would pay attention to some etiquette. Now that Chi Li's father was not here, Jiang Hai didn't have the intention to talk about these things. He just sat there and nodded. "Now that you have seen Jiang Hai, I will answer your second question. Why did we stop Brother Liang Kai's proposal? It is because we don't have the ability to implement it at all." Looking at Chi Song in front of her, Chi Li said to him very seriously, "Why can't it be implemented? Why can't it be implemented? I have already talked to the customs. It is completely possible to bring in live animals. Why can't it be implemented?" Looking at Chi Li in front of him, Chi Liangkai also stood out from the crowd and said with a face full of anger. In his view, Chi Li was completely against him. Why can't it be implemented? Why can't it be implemented? Because you can't get that cow. Looking at Chi Liangcai's appearance, Chi Li chuckled and then glanced at Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai heard them talking about live animals and cows, his sixth sense told him that it might be related to him. Why can't you get it? You can get it. This is our Chi family's business, not our family's business. You also have to do something. Seeing that Qi Li in front of him directly rejected his proposal, Qi Liangkai couldn't help but glare at Qi Li and say, "Sorry, this is not the place for you to shout. Besides, I don't quite understand what you're talking about." Hearing Qi Liangkai shouting at Qi Li, Jiang Hai frowned and then stood up. He slowly walked behind Qi Li and said to the people in front of him. He was a person who cared about his reputation the most. When he and Qi Li didn't have a good relationship before, he wouldn't allow anyone to shout at his nominal woman in front of him. Now that their relationship had made some progress, it was even more impossible for him to do so. Feeling Jiang Hai's action, Qi Li couldn't help but smile. Her hand unconsciously held Jiang Hai's hand. "What does this have to do with you? Why are you interrupting?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but say. He had to admit that this guy was here to be cannon fodder. Didn't he see that the others didn't say anything? However, although these people didn't want to be cannon fodder, it wasn't bad to let him say this sentence. According to Qi Song and the others, Qi Jingtao's role was just this, nothing more. This matter really has something to do with him, because the cow you are staring at is his. Patting the back of Jiang Hai's hand, Qi Li smiled and said to the people in front of her. Hearing Qi Li's words, the people in front of her couldn't help but be stunned. Qi Jingtao's face was full of embarrassment, Qi Liangcai's eyes kept rolling, Qi Song's face was a little gloomy, and Qi Yuanlong was a little speechless. LVC, who was following behind, still had her head lowered, not letting others see the expression on her face. "Oh, are you talking about my cow?" Hearing Qi Li's words and looking at the expressions of the people in front of him, Jiang Hai was also stunned. After talking for so long, they were talking about his cow, but what was there to talk about? Brother Liangkai and brother Jingtao saw that our restaurant's beef was selling well, so they wanted to get involved. But the restaurant's shares are 100% owned by the two of us, and we are not going to go public, nor are we going to raise capital, so I didn't want them to get involved. So they proposed that the beef in our restaurant could be provided by them, but they couldn't meet the quality of the beef in our restaurant, so they wanted to import your cow and raise it in China. I heard that it has already been arranged. What do you think? Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, Qi Li couldn't help but smile, and then she said to Jiang Hai. Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Originally, he was still puzzled. Didn't Qi Li say that she would go to the United States to look for him after she came back to deal with some things? Why did she come back for so long and have no intention of going back? At first, he thought that she was held back by something, but now it seemed that it was this matter. Since these cows are brother-in-laws, then everything is easy. Brother-in-law, I have already arranged for the customs. Your cows can be directly transported into the customs alive. We are all relatives. You eat the meat, and we also have to drink the soup, right? I think brother-in-law shouldn't refuse. Since they had found the supplier, Qi Liangkai and the others looked at Jiang Hai. Among them, Qi Liangkai also looked at Jiang Hai seriously and said to him. His words really didn't treat himself as an outsider. He, 3 words. Hearing Qi Liangcai's words in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and raised 3 fingers. No problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Liangcai's face flashed with a look of excitement. It can't be done. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai's answer instantly suppressed this excitement. Chapter 844. Bastard, you tricked me. Hearing Jiang's words, Qi Liangkai reacted and roared angrily. Oh. Not bad, your IQ has increased. You even know that I'm tricking you. Looking at Qi Liangkai in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Liangcai's eyes were about to burst into flames. If Jiang Hai wasn't teasing him, but Qi Jingtao, that guy would have already rushed over and let Jiang Hai beat him up. At present, there weren't many people who could beat Jiang Hai, but Qi Liangkai was used to being gloomy, so he wasn't so impulsive. Jiang Hai, what do you mean? Stopping his son, Qi Song said angrily to Jiang Hai. What do I mean? The literal meaning. With a shrug, Jiang Hai said calmly. Did we father and son offend you? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Song said with a puzzled face. He did not remember this. Hee, you are really forgetful. Who was the one who relied on the Yin family and then went to my mother-in-law's house to abuse their power? Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. So in their eyes, that was not considered offending? Indeed, the dirtiest things in the world were politics and business. There was a saying in the business circle that there were no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. Since ancient times, Wuxia had emphasized scholars, farmers, and businessmen. Why did they rank the businessmen, who were highly respected by foreigners, so low? It was because most businessmen had no bottom line. In order to make money, they would do anything. The day before yesterday, they were irreconcilable enemies. Today, they could be good friends who drank and chatted happily. The day after tomorrow, they could kill the whole family because of a small matter. This was the businessmen. Businessmen valued profits and despised righteousness. This was the exact opposite of Wuxia's policy since ancient times. Just like Qi Song's current state. He didn't think that what he did back then was wrong. He even asked Jiang Hai how there was a gap between them. Didn't he know that there was a huge gap between them? Speaking of which, the only person in this room who was not a businessman was Jiang Hai. In the past, Qi Li had always been a pure businesswoman. But now that she was focused on Jiang Hai, she was a little better. We did that for the sake of the Qi clan. I don't think we made the wrong choice back then. It's easier to make enemies than enemies. It's better to have one more friend than one more enemy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Song thought for a moment, but the arrogance on his face was still very calm. That selfless face made Jiang Hai really want to go up and give him a kick. He just didn't know if this old guy could withstand Jiang Hai's kick, so Jiang Hai suppressed this idea. That depends on whether this person is worth making friends with. Your businessman's face has nothing to do with me. In my opinion, since you're an enemy, then you should be prepared to fight to the death. Since you decided to be a traitor and seek refuge with the Yin clan, whether you die or not now has nothing to do with me. Even if you talk nonsense, my attitude will still be the same. Hearing Qi Song's words, Jiang Hai said quite disdainfully. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, 4 of the 5 people's faces changed dramatically. Now, Jiang Hai's words were very clear. He was now enemies with these people. He had already given them face by not beating them directly. How could they still want his cow? Daydreaming. You bastard, what are you talking about? Do you think you're awesome just because you raised 2 broken cows? Today, I'll let you see what your grandpa Qi's means is. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the others could bear it, but Qi Zhengtao couldn't. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, he directly walked out of the crowd. With a glare and a frown, he was ready to discuss with Jiang Hai. Of course, he was going to discuss with his fists. Jiang Hai was also looking at him with a smile. As long as he dared to show off, Jiang Hai would teach him a good lesson and let him know that he couldn't afford to provoke just anyone. As for the 2 old men, Jiang Hai couldn't make a move, because if he didn't control his strength, it would be troublesome if he killed them. But this Qi Zhengtao, Jiang Hai wouldn't be soft-hearted so easily. Qi Li, do you have the same intention? However, at this time, Qi Song stretched out his hand and stopped Qi Yuantao. Then, he stared at Qi Li and said slowly. Before this, their purpose was indeed to bring in Qi Li's restaurant's cows. Then, they would raise them themselves. In their eyes, the profits from the beef were really small. Unfortunately, they had looked for Qi Li many times, but Qi Li didn't give them a direct answer. They also encouraged the other shareholders in the company many times. They pressured Qi Li to merge the 4 restaurants into the Qi family. However, Qi Li had been holding back and didn't agree. She also didn't confront these people directly. This time, when Jiang Hai came back, they originally thought that it was Qi Li who asked Jiang Hai to come back to help her. But they didn't expect this guy to be the owner of those cows. No wonder Qi Li didn't allow anyone to touch those 4 restaurants. It turned out that they were the husband and wife's businesses. This adulterous couple, in the eyes of these people, if they didn't bring them in to make money, it was almost as if they wanted to kill them. Kinship didn't exist here. And Jiang Hai also saw through this point, so he refused very straightforwardly. At the same time, don't forget that Jiang Hai's cows were protected by the American government. At the same time, they were also protected by Jiang Hai. It was impossible to keep them alive, because there was no option at all. Jiang Hai is my husband. They didn't expect them to patrol, nor did they expect them to be in charge, but they were paid much more than ordinary security guards. The purpose was to let them deter some of the punks in the underworld so that these guys wouldn't dare to come and scam. After all, although they were related to the Qi group, it was impossible to be moved by every little thing. Naturally, the Qi group also raised a few such people. Qi Jingtao relied on the reputation of his company's direct descendant. Although he didn't mix well with the regular employees, he had some reputation among these people. When he walked into the security lounge, he saw 4 or 5 people in the distance. They were wearing security uniforms, sitting there, smoking and playing cards. The company clearly stated that smoking was not allowed, but for these people, this rule was not established. When these people saw Qi Jingtao coming, they immediately stood up with a smile. "Oh, Master Qi, you are here. Do you want to play?" Looking at Qi Jingtao, the security guard here said with a smile. "You are not at the level." Qi Jingtao said disdainfully as he looked at these people throwing dozens and hundreds of cards on the bench. "Yes, yes, yes. How can our level be enough for you to play? We are just killing time." Hearing what Qi Jingtao said, these people didn't care. Instead, they laughed and said, "Don't talk nonsense. My wife will come to me in a while. Today, I am looking for you because I have something to trouble you with." Hearing their compliments, Qi Jingtao also waved his hand, then looked at these people in front of him and said seriously, Since they could not get the restaurants, they began to think about the raw materials. Many people who had some connections came to Chile. They hoped that they could obtain the right to supply the beef. However, when Chile just put the beef there, these people left. It was not because of any reason but because they couldn't compete with her. However, it was precisely because of this that more people paid attention to the beef here. But this time, they were not concerned about the supply rights or the shares of the restaurants, but about the cattle. It was impossible to do it openly, so Chile and the others who coveted the restaurants surrendered without integrity this time and became the vanguard of these people. They came over because they wanted Chile to bring in some live cattle and breed them. In a small way, these cattle would be money in the future. In a big way, it was called improving the domestic cattle breed, which was beneficial to the country and the people. However, in the face of such a big accusation, Jiang Hai only wanted to raise a middle finger and tell them that it was none of their business. Hee, these people in the country are really interesting. Touching his nose, Jiang Hai laughed. It seemed that his choice to go to the United States was very wise. Otherwise, in the country, his manor, farm, and so on would have been occupied by some so-called government officials. A department-level cadre was probably enough to ruin his family. If they got the cattle but didn't study it, they would occupy his pasture. If the pasture was not studied, they would probably study him. At that time, not only would his family be ruined, but he would also die. This was inevitable. Of course, this couldn't be said that Jiang Hai was too pessimistic. No matter what, he had to prepare for the worst, right? Compared to the country, the United States was not much better. If Jiang Hai went to the United States at the beginning and showed his strong side, he would probably be eliminated by those people in the United States in an instant. But now, it was already the 3rd year. It was not an exaggeration to describe his power in the United States as intertwined. The biggest difference between the United States and Wuxia was that the world was based on the gold standard. As a taxpayer, Jiang Hai would become the most powerful person in the privileged class in the United States as long as he did not go against the United States government in terms of principles. But in the country, as long as he did not become an official, he would never become a person of the privileged class. He was really too lazy to deal with the deceit of the officialdom. One wrong step there, and he would be doomed eternally. Are you sure about who is behind those people? Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also understood that Qi Song and the others were actually just some subordinates. The people who really wanted to touch his piece of meat should be the people at the top. A second-tier big shot's grandson, but I haven't determined who it is. The other party is very secretive, but don't worry. What you have to do now is to expand your influence in the United States as much as possible. As long as your influence is greater, then these people won't dare to do anything to me. And even if they do, I can still go to the United States to find you. What if we emigrate? Qi Li shrugged. She didn't care too much about this. To be honest, she was very interested in the brand of the Qi Group. She couldn't just watch this company collapse, so she had been keeping an eye on it. However, if it really came to the point where she had to become an enemy of Wuxia, then she would not hesitate to give up here. Just as Qi Li said, Jiang Hai's place was her escape route. Similarly, her place was also Jiang Hai's escape route. It's really troublesome. Like I said, what I hate the most is these twists and turns. Are you done dealing with things? Let's go home. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said as if he had given up. He really hated these things. He was not the kind of person who took pleasure in guessing other people's thoughts. He did not like to take risks. He preferred to crush. It was as simple as that. Okay, you go downstairs and wait for me. I'm going to ask the heads of those departments to come up and take these documents away. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's little face couldn't help but blush. Go home. What do you want to do when you go home? That doesn't need to be said. However, she wouldn't object to this. She gave Jiang Hai's chest a punch and said in a low voice, "You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."